Chapter 1146. The bald crane was feeling smug, but at the instant it heard Su Ming's words, it shuddered and turned around swiftly to look at him. Let's go. In the past, I didn't have enough power to help you retrieve part of your physical body, but now, I believe that I can. Su Ming stared at the distant galaxy, and there was no killing intent in his gaze, but a strange and enchanting look. He charged forward. At that moment, the bald crane could no longer care about fighting against Flame Fiend's progenitor. It quickly followed behind Su Ming. Physical body? Are you talking about my physical body? Half of your physical body is in the camp of power from true Sacredine world, Su Ming said calmly as he took a step forward. In whose hands? A fierce glare appeared on the bald crane's face. Huizhu. Su Ming turned into a long arc and charged into the distance. In the past, Wu Zi had used a green feather to lure the bald crane over. That feather had been given to her by Huizhu. Wu Zi had been intimidated by Huizhu, which was why she had lured the bald crane over. Huizhu's final goal was to unravel a secret hidden in the bald crane's physical body. In the past, Su Ming might have learned of everything, but he could not continue venturing deeper into the area where the true world was stationed. He could not find Huizhu, and his level of cultivation was not high enough either. Later on, he was forced out by the Almighty in Mastery Realm, and he fled into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land. Only then did he manage to avoid disaster. However, the difference between the current Su Ming and his past self could be said to be like the difference between heaven and earth. Besides, Su Ming did not intend to use his level of cultivation to win. He had something even more powerful, and that was his status as a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, Dao Kong. As they charged forward, Su Ming was in front, the bald crane was by his side, Jiu Kai was right behind him, and Flame Fiend's progenitor was right at the back. The group turned into long arcs and sliced through the endless galaxy to charge towards the place where the four great realms were stationed. Time trickled by. With their speed, in just a day, they shot through the endless galaxy and saw the barrier formed by the shattered pieces of planets Su Ming had cleared in the past. It was located in the galaxy ahead of them, and it was right in front of them. At the instant Su Ming saw the barrier, he lifted his right hand. The bald crane had been with Su Ming for many years, so it naturally understood his intentions. With a single move, it immediately turned into smoke and crawled into Su Ming's storage bag. Then, Su Ming took a step towards the barrier formed by the shattered fragments of the planets. A loud bang shot into the air. That sound might have surged into the sky, but it could not stop Su Ming in the slightest. A rampaging power spread out from the rune, but at the instant it touched Su Ming, that rampaging power instantly turned gentle, and the sacred constellation robe appeared on Su Ming's body. At that moment, he was no longer Su Ming, but had completely turned into Dao Kong. He wore the sacred constellation robe, and his purple hair reached his feet. His face was handsome, and there was an awe-inspiring air about him. Su Ming moved through the barrier with incredible ease. The barrier could prevent outsiders from stepping in and serve as a warning. But to Su Ming, who had possessed Dao Kong, it was naturally impossible for the four great true worlds to guard against his arrival. At the instant the rampaging power touched Jiu Kai, he looked as if he had turned into nothingness. The rampaging power could not detect his existence, allowing him to calmly walk into the barrier. Flame Fiend's progenitor had the weakest level of cultivation, but he was still an almighty in Mastery Realm. There was no way he would be stopped by a rune that had not been fully activated. At the instant the rampaging power closed in on him, he let out a cold harumph, and the rampaging power tumbled backwards with a bang, allowing Flame Fiend's progenitor to step into the area where the forces of power from the four great true worlds were stationed. However, the instant Flame Fiend's progenitor touched the rune, he was immediately noticed by the Almighty stationed in the four great true worlds. When Su Ming had first arrived, the Almighty stationed in the area had isolated themselves and fallen into deep sleep. It was because while Su Ming's level of cultivation might have seemed very strong, he had not been able to attract their attention. Yet this time, the arrival of Flame Fiend progenitor was completely different. with his status and power as an almighty in Mastery Realm. Almost the instant he stepped into the barrier, three powerful presences stirred up a loud bang that surged into the sky from the area they were defending. They caused all the cultivators from the forces of power from true Sacredine world to be apprehensive, and they swiftly descended from the depths of the land. In the blink of an eye, the three presences turned into wills in front of Su Ming. At the same time the galaxy trembled, they turned into three people. A vast presence that could shake the world spread out from their bodies without any restraint. The strength of that presence instantly caused the cultivators from true Sacredine world to tremble. When they looked towards the sky, zealousness and respect appeared on their faces. They knew that this was the presence of the true saints stationed in this place. Flame Fiend's progenitor, you've crossed the boundary. Booming sounds came from one of the three people's mouths, and they turned into thunder that rumbled in all directions. As his voice spread out, a large amount of lightning swept through the area. The person who spoke was an old man. He was built and dressed in a long robe. Lightning sparks seemed to be contained in his eyes, and they could make all those whose levels of cultivation were not as great as his crumble at the instant they met his gaze. The two people beside him were a man and a woman. They looked to be middle-aged, but based on their levels of cultivation and the feeling of age in their presences, it was clear that they were old monsters who had lived for an unknown number of years. The first person they cast their gazes towards was Flame Fiend's progenitor, then Zhu Yu Kai, and finally Su Ming. When they saw Flame Fiend's progenitor, their expressions remained the same, but when they saw Zhu Yu Kai, their pupils shrank in a barely noticeable manner. Zhu Yu Kai looked like he was only in Mastery Realm, but based on the feedback from the rune, the three of them could only sense that Flame Fiend's progenitor was in Mastery Realm. To these almighties who had lived for an unknown number of years, they could immediately tell that there was something strange about this. If this sort of strange thing happened to those who were not almighties, they would not pay any attention to it. But if it happened to almighties, then it was strange, and it meant that there were many changes to it. This sort of change caused the three of them to be unable to help themselves but think of many things. Zhu Yu Kai's calm expression caused them to pay extra attention to him. As for Su Ming, the three of them only cast him a glance before they automatically ignored him. His level of cultivation in Lunar Culpa Realm was nothing in their eyes, and they had naturally learned of his identity through the feedback from the rune. Fellow Taoists, why have you come to the place where true Sacredine world is stationed and even brought along a direct descendant of true Morning Tao world's Morning Tao sect? A freezing glare shone in the eyes of the old man, with lightning spreading out of his body. When he looked towards Hua Kuei and Zhu Yu Kai, he completely ignored Su Ming. Zhu Yu Kai did not speak, but Flame Fiend's progenitor chuckled. With Su Ming around, he felt that it was not his turn to greet the three of them. After all, this was the place where the forces of power from the four great true worlds were stationed. Even if he was an almighty, he still had to be slightly more cautious. Besides, he was also trying to guess Su Ming's relationship with the people in this place. Su Ming's expression was calm. He did not even cast a glance at the three people and walked forward. However, when he walked out, displeasure appeared in the eyes of the three almighties from true Sacredine world who were stationed in this place. The old man did not say anything. His gaze still landed on Hua Kuei and Zhu Yu Kai, but the middle-aged woman smiled faintly from the middle-aged man and woman beside him. Boy from Morning Tao sect, this isn't the place where true Morning Tao world is stationed. It's not a place where you can enter as you please. Why aren't you waiting by the side and waiting for someone from true Morning Tao world to come and take you away? Su Ming ignored her and continued walking forward. In the eyes of others, these three people were almighties who stood high and mighty above them. But in Su Ming's eyes, it was not difficult for him to kill them. The middle-aged woman frowned. She did not have much of a good impression of true Morning Tao world to begin with. The four great true worlds might seem to be working together, but in truth, there was endless internal strife going on. They might not have gone so far as to attack and kill a direct descendant of Morning Tao sect. After all, with their status, there was no need for them to do such a thing. Besides, when Su Ming stepped into the rune, The Almighties from true morning Tao world had also noticed it. They might be rushing over at that moment, but it was not impossible for them to teach this boy who disrespected his seniors a lesson. She lifted her right hand and pointed at Su Ming. Then let me teach you a lesson on behalf of your seniors for being disrespectful to your seniors. At the instant the woman's right hand fell, Su Ming turned his head around and cast her a cold glance. Why are you so noisy? Do you want to die? At the instant he looked over and his words echoed in the air. Su Ming had already disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already right in front of the woman. He lifted his right hand and swung it with a calm expression on his face. With a slap, the middle-aged woman coughed up a mouthful of blood. There were even quite a number of broken teeth in it. As she tumbled backwards, the left side of her face swelled up. Disbelief appeared in her eyes, but she did not even have time to be angry. Her expression instantly turned to shock. She had seen Su Ming's actions just now, but she could not dodge. It was not because Su Ming was fast, but because at the instant he looked towards her, a loud bang immediately rang out in her head, and she instantly lost all consciousness. In the midst of her shock, the old man beside her turned his head around and fixed his gaze on Su Ming. There was a solemn and shocked expression that had never appeared on his face before. The middle-aged man beside him sucked in a sharp breath. When he looked at Su Ming, his gaze was filled with shock. He had also seen that strike, and it was definitely not a divine ability that a person in Lunar Culpa realm could execute. Kill these three. Injure them, but keep them alive for now, Su Ming said flatly. Those who dare to be disrespectful to my lord should indeed be slapped. Flame Fiend's progenitor's wild and untamed words echoed in the air. He charged towards the three people. Zhu Yukai's expression was calm. He lifted his right hand and seized the air in front of him. The world immediately roared, and the expressions of the three people changed drastically. As they retreated together, distortions appeared in the galaxy around them, as if they had been sealed and completely locked down. Lord, you! The middle-aged woman's expression changed again, and it was the same for the two people beside her. A loud bang rang out in their heads. This was a form of address they had never expected. What shocked them even more was that Zhu Yukai had managed to completely seal the three of them in the galaxy with just a casual grab. This level of cultivation and this sort of divine ability were definitely not in Mastery Realm to the middle-aged man and woman. This was Fate Realm, but the old man did not think so. His pupils shrank, and when he looked at Zhu Yukai, there was terror and shock in his eyes. When he turned his head around, he looked at Su Ming, and his shock became even greater. Su Ming, who had the fifth kiln and absorbed Kang's soul, was the strongest person in all of Divine Essence Star Ocean and the barren lands of Divine Essence. He could do whatever he wanted. The strong were respected. If Su Ming had enough power and did not have anything holding him back, then forget just a few almighties. Even if he wanted to bring chaos to the entire barren lands of Divine Essence and kill millions of lives, he could do it with just a single thought. The middle-aged man forced down the shock in his heart and immediately said, Dao Kong, what are you trying to do? This is true sacred Yin world, and as a direct descendant of true morning Dao world, you're barging in recklessly. You must give true sacred Yin world an explanation. Do all of you really want to die? Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the middle-aged man seriously. The middle-aged man's heart trembled. The same words as before caused his heart to tremble. Just as he was about to say something, the old man by his side immediately let out a low growl. Shut up! The old man shouted at the middle-aged man, then wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming. Fellow Taoist, if you have a personal grudge against someone from true sacred Yin world, we will definitely not stop you. The old man suppressed the shudders in his heart, along with the rarely seen fear that appeared on his body. He could tell that the plump person was not in Fate Realm, but was in Life Realm. And just how terrifying was the person who could make an almighty in Life Realm willingly follow him? He no longer dared to think about it. The extra 500 words in this chapter are free. I apologize for what happened yesterday. I clearly remember that it was 10:43, but for some reason, I wrote it as 10:42. I'm begging for recommendation votes. If you can give me a few monthly votes, that would be even better. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1147. We will definitely not disturb you in the slightest. Fellow Taoist, please release the seal on us, and I will personally bring you to the person who offended you. The old man wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply. He did not underestimate Su Ming because he looked young. In this universe where the strong ruled, there was no longer any need for Dao Kong to show off his abilities. Having an almighty in mastery realm as his follower was already something shocking, and he also had an almighty in life realm. Besides, his level of cultivation and the slap just then were enough to make the old man feel apprehensive. At that moment, the middle-aged man and woman beside him also thought of many things. Their expressions were complicated, and they turned slightly dark. If the person before them was not Dao Kong and was not a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, even if he also came from the four great true worlds, the trio would not be so wary. After all, no matter how strong Su Ming and the others were, the four great true worlds had people who were even stronger. However, the person before them was Dao Kong, a direct descendant of true Morning Dao world's Morning Dao sect. This identity had reduced the methods the trio could use by more than half. Su Ming turned his head around and cast the old man a glance before nodding. Zhu Yukai's expression remained the same. He lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, the seal binding the trio disappeared without a trace in the galaxy, allowing them to regain their mobility. The old man bowed towards Su Ming again. This time, the man and woman beside him also wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed to him. Their expressions were no longer the same as before, which was faintly discernible. "I'm looking for Huizhu," Su Ming said faintly. Once he said those words, the old man's eyes focused. He turned his head around and looked at the middle-aged woman beside him. He was not the only one who did so. Even the middle-aged man cast a sidelong glance at him. At the instant the middle-aged woman heard Su Ming's words, she immediately hesitated. When she saw her companions looking over, her expression changed for a moment, and she sighed. "How did my junior sister offend you, fellow Taoist?" "She took something that she shouldn't have," Su Ming said calmly. "Oh, that's easy. I'll have her bring you what you need." "What is it?" the middle-aged woman immediately asked. "She'll know the specifics once she sees Huizhu." Su Ming's eyes gradually turned cold. The middle-aged woman fell silent. Once she nodded, she turned into a long arc and charged into the distance. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. He walked behind her, and with an incredibly quick speed, the group instantly rushed into the territory of the forces of power from true Sacredine world, keeping a lookout over the barren lands. As they charged forward, Su Ming looked at the planets and the spiral-shaped radix planets around him, and the scenes from the past rose in his head. This was his second time coming here, and, compared to the first time, he was much calmer. His cultivation base was completely different, and this time he was in complete control. As he moved forward, Su Ming saw the end of the path he had walked to in the past. It was the planet where Wu Li Zi was. Once he swept his gaze across it, a huge vortex gradually appeared in front of Su Ming under the middle-aged woman's lead. The vortex rumbled as it revolved. It was incomparably resplendent. If one were to look carefully, they would be able to see that the majestic vortex was made up of numerous stars. "Huizhu, what did you take that you shouldn't have? Open the rune and let us in." Almost at the instant they closed in on the huge vortex, the middle-aged woman suddenly spoke. Her voice reverberated in all directions and even entered the huge vortex, turning it into buzzing sounds. The old man's expression changed. He turned his head around and glared at the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged man's expression also changed involuntarily. Her straightforward words were clearly telling Huizhu that someone had come looking for them, and that she should be prepared beforehand. This scene caused the old man's expression to change continuously. He immediately opened his mouth and roared towards the vortex of planets. "Huizhu, open the rune. This matter is of great importance. I want you to open the rune immediately." The old man's words echoed in the air and traveled into the vortex of planets, but not a single reply came out. Within one of the planets, in the vortex of planets, was a desert. There were a large number of cultivators crawling on the ground as they moved forward with great difficulty. Their goal was a palace in the desert in the distance. At that moment, the palace was silent. There was a table in it, and there was a candle flame on it. As the light swayed, the faces of all lives appeared in it. As the light swayed and changed, there was an ancient book that was half opened under the candlelight. A woman's face appeared among the faces of all lives in the candlelight. With an aloof look in her eyes, she lifted her head and cast a glance above her before closing her eyes and ignoring the people around her. The old man's face was dark beyond the planet. Just as he was about to turn his head around to give Su Ming an explanation, Su Ming smiled. There was a chilling tone to his smile, along with a monstrous killing intent that was about to erupt. To him, destroying all the forces of power from true sacred world stationed in this place was not a difficult decision. He could do it with just one thought. What Kuei, break this vortex of planets, and search for that person called Huizhu. When Flame Fiend's progenitor heard this, his eyes shone. With a bang, a purple sea of fire erupted from his body and tumbled about in layers. He took a step towards the vortex of planets and spread his arms wide before swinging them forward. Immediately, the sea of fire around him tumbled about and charged towards the vortex of planets. Booming sounds surged into the sky and shook the entire area, causing all the cultivators in the area where true sacred world was stationed to feel their ears ringing. In shock, they flew up from where they were, and in the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of long arcs charged forth from the galaxy and charged towards the vortex of planets. While the old man was feeling anxious, a cold sneer appeared at the corners of the middle-aged woman's lips. If Dao Kong wanted to cause trouble for anyone else, she would not have minded it, but Huizhu was her junior sister. There was no way she would let Su Ming succeed. What she needed was for Su Ming to forcefully attack. There were quite a number of cultivators living in the vortex of planets, and all of them had extraordinary levels of cultivation. More importantly, there were also a few old men keeping watch over the place. With them around, they would definitely not let the person from Morning Dao sect cause trouble in this place. The vortex was made up of countless planets, and each planet had its own teleportation formation. If the teleportation formation wasn't opened, outsiders wouldn't be able to enter the planet they were in. They would have to destroy the teleportation formation by force before they could enter. This was also to provide absolute protection for the people who had the right to stay in the vortex, which was why when it was built in the past, such a rune had been carved into it. After all, there were only 4 vortexes of planets among the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds keeping a lookout over the place, and each of them was a crucial location for the forces of power from each true world keeping a lookout over the place. The purple sea of fire crashed into the entire vortex of planets. At the instant it touched them, booming sounds that shook the galaxy spread out, causing the tens of thousands of cultivators to turn pale and retreat simultaneously. The old Almighty had an anguished expression on his face. He sighed and laughed coldly in his heart. He did not remind the middle-aged woman about Zhu Yukai, since she was determined to provoke someone she could not provoke, and he had failed to stop her several times. Then whether she lived or died was of no concern to him. As for the middle-aged woman, the cold sneer on her lips became even colder. At that moment, there was still a burning sensation on her face. She wanted nothing more than to kill Su Ming. The middle-aged man among the 3 had a rather calm expression on his face. First of all, he could not tell Zhu Yukai's level of cultivation, which was why he was not as anxious as the old man. Second, Zhu was not his junior sister either, which was why her life and death had nothing to do with him. The middle-aged man was also rather eager to see how Su Ming would deal with the old monsters once he lured them out. The 3 of them each had their own thoughts, but none of them had expected that if they caused a ruckus, then what awaited them would be a destructive disaster. What awaited the forces of power from true sacred world keeping a lookout over the place would also be complete destruction. This destruction was still brewing. If everything went smoothly, then perhaps it would not happen. But if it did not, then it was not impossible for Su Ming to destroy the galaxy. At the instant Flame Fiend's progenitor swept the purple sea of fire towards the vortex of planets. Booming sounds reverberated in all directions, shocking the tens of thousands of cultivators in the area. At that instant, a cold harumph came from the vortex of planets, surrounded by the sea of fire. At the instant Su Ming heard that cold harumph, a barely noticeable glint shone in his eyes. He was rather familiar with that voice. It belonged to the Almighty in Mastery Realm, who had chased after him all the way to Western Ring, Nebula's foreign lands in the past. There was a hint of anger in that cold harumph, along with a bone-chilling chill. At the instant it spread out, it was as if a chilling gust of wind had stirred up in the galaxy. Once it crashed into the purple sea of fire in an unseen manner. It looked as if a violent gust of wind had swept through it, and it started showing signs of being extinguished. Flame Fiend's progenitor threw his head back and roared. The purple sea of fire erupted from his body in a vast manner once more and turned into a gigantic palm of fire. When it stretched out, it was as big as the vortex of planets, and it pushed down on the vortex. This place is not the place for you to act rashly. Even if you are a direct descendant of Morning Tao sect, get lost immediately. As the cold harumph echoed in space, a palm swiftly appeared in the vortex of planets, and it was also incredibly huge. It swiftly crashed into Flame Fiend's progenitor's palm of fire. Booming sounds caused the galaxy to tremble as if it was about to be torn apart. Flame Fiend's progenitor's expression changed, and he staggered a few steps backwards. He might be in Mastery Realm, but he had not mastered it. At that moment, as he retreated, the final word from the cold voice in the vortex of planets reverberated in space with loud rumbles, turning into countless echoes that shook the universe. Su Ming smiled. This was the second time he smiled since he came to the place where the forces of power from true Sacredine world were stationed over the barren lands. There was a malicious air to his smile. If true Sacredine world continued, then when Su Ming smiled for the third time, he would destroy Piercing world. By his side, Zhu Kai sighed softly. With one move, he walked towards the vortex of planets. He might not have had much contact with Su Ming, but he understood him better than the people in the area, especially the meaning behind Su Ming's smile. He also knew that once Su Ming possessed the fifth kiln, even Zhu Kai himself would be incredibly wary of him when he was at the peak of his condition, much less the other people in the area. After all, he was a member of true Sacredine world, which was why he did not need Su Ming to summon him. Activate the rune. We will only take one person. At the instant Zhu Kai closed in, his true power erupted from his body without any hesitation. When it appeared, the galaxy roared, and the expressions of all the people in the area changed drastically. I'm sorry, for the next 4 days, I can only read one chapter a day. I brought my child to Bing City. She's going to primary school, and I want to take her out for a stroll before she goes to school. I promise that I will make up for it when I go back, and I won't do it at the end of the month. My fellow Taoists, please understand. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1148. This was the power that belonged to those in Life Realm. At the instant it spread out, it caused the galaxy to tremble with a bang. The expressions of the tens of thousands of cultivators in the area changed drastically, and their hearts trembled. It was as if an invisible hammer had struck their hearts violently, causing them to be shocked. Their cultivation bases also instantly felt as if they had been completely suppressed. Their minds roared, and their minds went blank. The old man was in a slightly better state. At that moment, his face was pale, but he could still be considered to be calm. After all, he had already guessed Zhu Kai's level of cultivation, and right then, he had just verified his guess. However, the middle-aged man by his side had disbelief on his face. His eyes were dull, and he felt as if there were 10 million thunderbolts roaring in his head at the same time. A normal cultivator might not know what Life Realm was, because in their eyes, masters of fate, lives, and death were just a realm. After all, even Su Ming had only slowly explored the realm later on before he understood the detailed divisions of realms. However, the middle-aged man was an almighty in Mastery Realm. Even though he had just stepped through the threshold, his understanding towards Life Realm clearly far surpassed that of the tens of thousands of cultivators in the area. There was an ancient saying that those who do not know fear nothing. It meant that if a person did not know how terrifying something was, then they would not be afraid. Even though it was a little one-sided, there was still some logic to it. Conversely, the more a person understood how terrifying something was, the more they would be afraid. This was something that was magnified endlessly on the middle-aged man. As he trembled, great shock and astonishment appeared in his eyes. He came to an abrupt understanding as to why the old man beside him had tried to stop the middle-aged woman from provoking Su Ming so many times. Even if it was not because of his level of cultivation, a person who could make an almighty in Life Realm follow him willingly was still enough to shock others and make all-powerful warriors pay great attention to him. He also came to an abrupt understanding that Su Ming was not just saying things for no reason. He had his own way of doing so. If he was already in such a state, then it was even more so for the middle-aged woman who had caused all of this. She might be an almighty in Mastery Realm, but just like the middle-aged man, she had just stepped through the threshold. She could not be considered to have completed Mastery Realm. At that moment, the woman trembled. Terror and disbelief appeared in her eyes. A huge storm raged in her head, and a strong feeling that something bad was about to happen instantly drowned her mind like a tidal wave. She turned her head bitterly and looked at the old man next to her. When she saw that the old man's expression was still rather calm, and he was only looking at her with a complicated gaze, there was no way the young woman would not know why he had stopped her. However, it was already too late. She had informed her junior sister, and what should have been a simple matter had become even more complicated. Furthermore, it had become even more dangerous. However, the woman could not accept this. A brilliant light shone in her eyes. So what if it was an almighty in Life Realm? It was not as if there were no almighties in Life Realm among the forces of power from the four great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands. Based on what she knew, there was a progenitor from true Sacredine world at the core of the vortex of planets. This person had not shown himself for a long time and had always been in isolation. Unless there was a major event that involved the survival of this place or an invasion by a powerful enemy that he could not fight against, this person would not come out of isolation. Each of the forces of power from the four great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands had an old monster like this. They were the strongest guards left behind by the four great true worlds in the Star Abyss. Because of that, it was enough for them to completely contain the Star Abyss. Unless an almighty in Death Realm appeared in the Star Abyss, but there were only about a few dozen people in Life Realm in the four great true worlds. As for almighties in Death Realm, they were even rarer. They were already at the level of culpal lords in each true world, and they were existences that were second only to the true progenitors. There were less than 10 of them. It was impossible for anyone to reach such a realm that was so difficult to reach while Divine Abyss Star Ocean was suppressed. Even if they did appear, the four great true worlds would immediately send several almighties in Death Realm over to either kill them or seal them. That was why there was still a hint of hope in the middle-aged woman's heart. Zhu Yukai's power spread out. As his words echoed in the air, the old man's voice in the vortex of planets instantly disappeared. After a long while, as the vortex rotated, an old man dressed in a long robe made of sackcloth walked out. The old man's expression was solemn. Once he walked out, his gaze instantly fell on Zhu Yukai, and he wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards him. The old man lifted his head and asked languidly, "With Senior's level of cultivation, I wonder who you are asking for." "Juva," Zhu Yukai said in a low voice, not wanting things to get out of hand. "This is the main camp of the forces of power from true Sacredine world, keeping a lookout over the barren lands. All those who have the right to stay in this place have complete freedom. It is not convenient for me to interfere too much. Since this person doesn't want to come out, then please leave. Do not disturb the peace of true sacredine world. The old man waited for a moment, but when he saw that Zhu did not walk out of the vortex of planets, he frowned slightly and spoke to Zhu Yukai. When Zhu Yukai heard this, a brilliant light shone in his eyes. He believed that he had already given enough respect to the people in this place. If it was not because he was once a member of true sacredine world, he would have ignored this matter. When he heard the old man say the same thing, he could not help but let out a cold harumph and take a step forward. The old man in the sackcloth moved to the side and did not stop him. He knew that with his level of cultivation, he did not have the right to stop this almighty in life realm. But this was the main camp of the forces of power from true sacredine world, keeping a lookout over the barren lands. When he moved back, the old man's expression was calm, and not a single hint of change could be detected on his face. As Zhu Yukai closed in, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the vortex of planets in front of him. With it, the vortex trembled with a bang. The sound reverberated in all directions, causing the galaxy to tremble and endless ripples to spread out. Boom! As the vortex of planets trembled violently, Zhu Yukai lifted his hands, and, as if he was tearing space apart, he tore at the vortex of planets. With it, the tremors in the vortex of planets became even more intense. The countless planets in it started trembling, and a vast amount of fog could be vaguely seen swirling in the air. A gigantic crack appeared in the galaxy with a ripping sound. When it swept through the area, it looked as if it wanted to split the vortex of planets in half. His power in life realm spilled out without holding anything back. It filled the entire area, causing the countless planets in the vortex of planets to tremble violently, startling many of the people who were in isolation. On the planet where Zhu Hua was, the desert ground trembled. The sky was in chaos. The lights in the hall swayed violently, and the woman's face was revealed. There was a dark look on her face, and as her eyes sparkled, a cold sneer appeared on her lips. You overestimate yourself. So what if you're in life realm? If we were in the world outside, I would have definitely died, but this is true sacredine world's main camp. The rules in this place state that if I don't want to go out, no one can force me to leave. If I'm forced to leave, then all of true sacredine world's dignity will fall. If the rune in the vortex of planets is torn apart just like that, then all of true sacredine world's dignity will fall. To a true world, dignity is an incredibly important matter. As long as I don't come out, no one can do anything about it. When the woman in the candlelight laughed coldly with a dark expression on her face, she immediately heard an ancient voice spread out in all directions from the depths of the vortex of planets. At the instant she heard it, the woman's cold sneer grew even stronger. Uriel has been born, but your form has not yet arrived. You could be considered to be half a fellow cultivator in life realm. Since it wasn't easy for you to reach your current level of cultivation, and on account of the past, I will not hold you accountable for intruding into true sacredine world's main camp. Leave. The old voice sounded as if it had not spoken for many years. His words were slightly choppy, and there was an endless amount of ancientness in them. When it spread out, all those who heard it felt as if time was flowing past them. What followed after was the misconception that all their blood, essence, and even their life force and cultivation bases were about to wither away. It was especially so for Zhu Yukai. He shuddered, and a complicated look appeared in his eyes. The woman had clearly recognized him, and he had also recognized the person who had spoken. It was one of his seniors in true sacredine world. In silence, a brilliant light shone in Zhu Yukai's eyes. He did not retreat, but instead moved forward, charging towards the vortex of planets. Today, I will only take one person. If I don't open this rune, I won't leave. Yet at the instant Zhu Yukai approached the vortex of planets, a sigh came from within. Then, a pushing force with a supreme, mighty pressure appeared and landed on Zhu Yukai's body with a bang. Zhu Yukai jolted and staggered a few steps backwards. The area around his body immediately distorted, and a gigantic circle of light instantly enveloped him completely. As if it was sealing him, he turned into a bubble floating in the galaxy. Kill those in Mastery Realm, chase those in Life Realm, and cripple the lad from Morning Dao sect to serve as a warning to others. When the old voice spoke again, a mocking smile appeared on the middle-aged woman's lips. She took a step forward and charged toward Su Ming. The middle-aged man by her side let out a sigh of relief in his heart. With a calm expression, he, too, closed in on Su Ming. The old man in the sackcloth and the old man who had guessed Zhu Yu Kai's level of cultivation also moved forward in silence. One of them walked towards Flame Fiend's progenitor, and the other towards Su Ming. When the trapped Zhu Yu Kai saw this scene, he sighed softly. He saw a strange, evil smile appear on Su Ming's lips for the third time before he closed his eyes. The tens of thousands of cultivators in the area also had hostile expressions on their faces. They might not have appeared, but they surrounded the area and formed a great isolation rune. As they rotated, the rune rumbled and turned into a powerful pushing force that wanted to sweep up the trapped Su Ming and Flame Fiend's progenitor and shift them out of the area where true Sacredine World was stationed. Several gigantic radix planets floated towards them at that moment. They shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet, and waves of terrifying presence spread out from them. This was the full power of the forces of power from true Sacredine World stationed to keep a lookout over the area. With this sort of power, and without Zhu Yu Kai's help, it seemed like it was enough to kill Su Ming and Flame Fiend's progenitor. There was not a hint of fear on Flame Fiend's progenitor's face. Instead, he started laughing coldly. There was a pleased look on his face, and Su Ming's smile grew wider. If that's the case, then one of the four forces of power stationed to keep a lookout over this place will disappear. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed swiftly at the galaxy above him. With it, his long hair instantly changed and turned crimson. A red glare shone in his eyes, and a heinous, murderous aura erupted from his body with a bang. As the murderous aura erupted, the starry sky above began to tremble. An invisible force that came from nothingness suddenly pressed down on this place with a loud rumble. The galaxy trembled. As booming sounds shook the sky, the Almighty's expressions changed drastically, and a corner of the fifth kiln was revealed. To be continued. If you like this work, please come come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1149. This is the fifth kiln. This is impossible. How could this be the fifth kiln? The expression of the old man who had chased after Su Ming into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land with just one palm in the past changed drastically at that moment. His body started trembling furiously. There was no way he would not recognize the fifth kiln. It had existed for a long time in Divine Essence Star Ocean and was known as one of the most mysterious fifth kiln. He had seen it with his own eyes in the past, and he had only managed to escape with his life. He had obtained a serendipity from it, and it was an incredibly sacred item in his heart. The old man had a supreme treasure in his hands that he rarely used. He would only use it when he ran into something incredibly important. That supreme treasure was the one he had obtained from the fifth kiln in the past. He was not the only one whose expression changed in an unprecedented manner. The other three people by his side also looked as if they were suffocating at that moment. They stared at the galaxy above them in shock, and their faces turned pale. There was disbelief on their faces. This was something they had experienced in their lives, and it was the most unbelievable and indescribable thing they had ever experienced in their lives. The old man who had guessed Zhu Yu Kai's level of cultivation had a pale face at that moment, and he started laughing brokenly. Only at that moment did he realize that he had still underestimated Zhu Yu Kai. He had thought that a person who had those in Mastery Realm obeying him and those in Life Realm following him had to have some sort of status, but in the end he did not expect that this was no longer a status. This was absolute power. This was invincibility in the universe. The middle-aged man by his side, who had originally thought that this matter had nothing to do with him and wanted to watch the show, was trembling and his breathing quickening. He had seen the fifth kiln before, but he had only cast a glance at it. He did not have the courage to step into it. Instead, he had retreated from outside the fifth kiln, not daring to enter. The middle-aged man by his side had originally thought that this matter had nothing to do with him and wanted to watch the show. At that moment, he shuddered and his breathing quickened. He had seen the fifth kiln before, but he had only cast a glance at it. He did not have the courage to step into it. Instead, he had retreated outside the fifth kiln, not daring to enter. The person with the most unpleasant expression among them could be said to have lost all color in her face. There was even panic in her eyes, along with great regret and fear. It could be said that everything that had happened in this place was largely related to the woman. If she had not warned Huizhu beforehand, then Su Ming would not have wanted to destroy this expanse cosmos. If the woman had not thought herself clever, then the fifth kiln would not have descended to this state. A loud bang went off in the woman's mind. As she shuddered, she staggered a few steps back. Her eyes were dazed. Not even in her dreams did she expect that the weakest among the three would be the flame fiend in Mastery Realm, and the strongest would not be the Almighty in Life Realm who was currently sealed, but the crimson-haired Dao Kong who was surrounded by a heinous, murderous aura. Compared to the Almighties whose expressions changed drastically, the tens of thousands of cultivators in the area were mostly at a loss. With their levels of cultivation, they might have heard about the fifth kiln's existence from some of the scrolls in Divine Essence Star Ocean, but it could be said that none of them had seen it with their own eyes. That was why when they saw a corner of the gigantic kiln reveal itself in the galaxy and sensed a mighty pressure that caused their hearts to tremble, they still charged up and charged towards Su Ming. To them, the order from the person with the highest status in the main camp was the highest order. Hurry up and disperse. A low roar filled with shock came swiftly from the vortex of planets. That voice belonged to the strongest Almighty in the area who had sealed Zhu Yuji, who had said that he would kill the Huokue and cripple Su Ming. At that moment, there was an unprecedented shock in his voice, so much so that his tone had changed. As it echoed in the air, there was anxiety in his voice, and it traveled into the minds of all the cultivators who were charging towards Su Ming with killing intent. At the same time, booming sounds surged into the sky from the vortex of planets. 6 planets rushed out from within the gigantic vortex, and when they did so, they turned into 6 figures who charged towards Su Ming. This is a misunderstanding. Fellow Taoist, please do not be angry. An old voice said anxiously. It came from a middle-aged man who stood right in front of the 6 people. That middle-aged man was the person who had sealed Zhu Yuji previously. As the strongest guardian in the area, his heart was in a mess at that moment. He had not expected that the direct descendant of Morning Dao sect would be able to summon the 5th kiln. There were men and women among the 5 people beside him. All of them were Almighties in Fate Realm, but at that moment, even they could not hide the shock and astonishment on their faces as their expressions changed. They were all the Almighties and the forces of power from true, sacred Eon-world stationed in the barren lands of Divine Essence to keep a lookout over the area. There were 10 of them, and it was rare for them to venture out at the same time, unless the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean invaded. Yet, at that moment, in the face of the 5th kiln's descent, they could not care about anything else in their shock. The higher their levels of cultivation were, the more they understood just how terrifying the 5th kiln was. Besides, which one of them had not gone to the 5th kiln before? Which one of them had not obtained a supreme treasure from the 5th kiln? For a period of time, the weather changed. The previous air of superiority instantly turned into one of panic. And all of this was because Su Ming had summoned the 5th kiln. Misunderstanding. A bloodthirsty smile appeared on the crimson-haired Su Ming's lips. Sealing my war immortal is a misunderstanding. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the 6 incoming long arcs. Immediately, the 5th kiln in the galaxy above him let out a great, mighty pressure as it descended. It spread out in all directions with loud bangs, causing the galaxy to look as if it was about to shatter. It trembled with a bang, and countless cracks appeared. They were like sharp blades that swept through the area. This was the sign that the galaxy of this expanse cosmos could not withstand the fifth kiln's descent and started showing signs of crumbling. A large amount of dimension shattered and swept through the area, instantly causing 5 of the 6 people to slow down. However, a glint appeared in the eyes of the middle-aged man in the lead. With a bang, he rushed out and moved through the dimensional cracks to charge towards Su Ming. As long as he killed Su Ming, everything would naturally be resolved. Injuring my follower is also a misunderstanding. There was madness in Su Ming's voice. When it reverberated in the area, the tens of thousands of cultivators' faces turned pale. Their bodies looked as if they were about to crumble under the mighty pressure. In fact, some of those with lower levels of cultivation let out shrill screams of pain. With a bang, their bodies were torn to shreds, and their flesh and blood flew everywhere. Wanting to cripple me is also a misunderstanding that you speak of. As Su Ming laughed long and hard, the middle-aged man, the strongest progenitor in the area and the almighty in life realm who had sealed Juyu Kai, closed in on Su Ming. When they were 1,000 feet apart, he lifted his right hand, and killing intent shone in his eyes. He pushed his palm towards Su Ming through the air. The galaxy shuddered. At the instant the middle-aged man pushed his palm towards Su Ming, an indistinct outline appeared around Su Ming. That outline was the appearance of the shrunken fifth kiln. Like a layer of defense, it clashed against the middle-aged man's palm in an unseen manner. With a bang, the outline of the fifth kiln shuddered, but it did not shatter. Su Ming was not injured in the slightest, but the middle-aged man's expression changed. He took a few steps back, and when he lifted his head, anguish and disbelief appeared on his face. The cultivators in this place wanted to kill me just now, and this is also a misunderstanding. And this strike of yours, is it also a misunderstanding that you speak of? Su Ming licked his lips. When the bloodthirst in him became even more obvious, he lifted his right hand and swung it. With a bang, a sea of fire that surged into the sky erupted from the fifth kiln above him. The color of that sea of fire was purple, and it was an endless flame that even almighties in Mastery Realm would have to face with caution. If they were the slightest bit careless, their bodies and souls would be destroyed. The purple sea of fire tumbled outwards with a bang. This was the first time the fifth kiln's flames burned beyond Divine Essence Star Ocean. In the past, the disaster had only appeared in Divine Essence Star Ocean, and this was the first time it appeared beyond Divine Essence Star Ocean. As the sea of fire swept through the area, no matter how fast the tens of thousands of cultivators in the area were, they could not outrun the tumbling flames from the fifth kiln. In an instant, nearly 10,000 cultivators were submerged by the sea of fire. They did not even have time to scream in pain before they were reduced to ashes. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and they were burned to ashes. The flames known as the disaster in Divine Essence Star Ocean could easily kill the cultivators in this place. Nearly 10,000 cultivators died. As the thick sea of fire roared, powerful killing intent appeared in the eyes of the 10 almighties in the area, especially the strongest almighty in Life Realm. He glared at Su Ming, and great regret rose in his heart. Dao Kong, there is no enmity between you and the people in this place. You know enmity between us? I only know that if a vicious dog shows any murderous intent towards me, I will kill it, and if a venomous snake shows its venomous fangs, I will crush it. How could there be people who wanted to kill me just now, and when they couldn't kill me, they fled safely? Today, I will destroy this world. I will make all the lives in this place die. Su Ming lifted his arms and swung his arm. The galaxy let out a loud bang, and the fifth kiln descended in its complete form. The gigantic fifth kiln brought with it a suffocating mighty pressure and a sea of fire that could burn the heavens. At the instant it descended, it brought a disaster, a nightmare to all the people in the area. Dao Kong, does your true Morning Dao world want to wage war against true Sacred Yin world? The middle-aged man roared, and the ancient tone in his voice turned into powerful, killing intent. Wage war? Then let's wage war. The crimson-haired Su Ming laughed loudly. He swung his right hand, and the sea of fire tumbled about with loud bangs. The tens of thousands of cultivators had nowhere to hide during that instant. All of them died. In the end, there were still some who let out shrill screams of pain. They echoed in the air, and it was as if the place had turned into hell. The Almighties also retreated in the sea of fire. Terror appeared on their faces, and it was an expression that was rarely seen in their lives. The planets crumbled and exploded into pieces. The radix planets and war planets might contain terrifying power, but compared to the fifth kiln, they were so weak that they could not even withstand a single blow. All of them exploded. Tyneen, since you Almighties from True Morning Tao World came here and saw this, then True Morning Tao World will have to pay the price for this. The middle-aged man roared towards the sky, and veins popped up on his face. Today, if anyone tries to stop me, then I will destroy their world. Su Ming lifted his right foot and took a swift step forward. The sea of fire let out a bang. As it tumbled about, the light from the fifth kiln reached 100,000 feet. With just one thought, Su Ming could make all the lives in the fifth kiln descend. We will obey your orders, Your Highness. We will not attack. A sigh came from the air, and there was a hint of respect in that sigh. Your Highness? You're not an ordinary member of Morning Tao sect. The middle-aged man from True Sacred Een World's expression changed swiftly. He looked towards Su Ming, and his heart trembled once more. Dynast Dao Kong is naturally not an ordinary member of our family. He is one of the 10 heirs appointed by the Culpa Lord of True Morning Tao World. A woman's cold harumph came from the air. Su Ming was familiar with that voice. It was Su Hui. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1150. Once the middle-aged man from True Sacred Een World heard the words Dynast, his expression changed. Only a certain number of people in the 4 great true worlds could possess that title, and each generation's Culpa Lords of a true world would be chosen from among the people who had that title. That was why they were known as dynasts. For example, Chang he was known as a dynast in True Sacred Een World. Even though there were others who had the same title in True Sacred Een World, the final Culpa Lord would definitely be chosen from among them. It was the same for True Morning Tao World. There were 10 great heirs who were known as dynasts. The future Culpa Lord of True Morning Tao World would be chosen from among them. During the time they were chosen, or rather, they would be tested. The 10 of them would be given a large amount of resources, causing their levels of cultivation to increase by leaps and bounds. Once they were chosen, they would receive their inheritance, and it would not just be their level of cultivation and epiphany, but also the entire True Morning Tao World. All those who were known as dynasts in True Morning Tao World were famous people, and most of the people in the other true worlds knew them. The middle-aged man might have isolated himself in this place all year round, but once every 100 years, someone would send him a jade slip to inform him of everything that had happened in the 4 great true worlds. Because of that, even though he stayed in this place all year round, it was impossible for him to be completely unaware of what had happened in the world outside. However, the middle-aged man did not know that there was a person named Dao Kong among the 10 great dynasts in True Morning Tao World. There is only one possibility for this. It had happened during the past 100 years, and he had not had the time to read the jade slip. In fact, based on the fact that the other people also clearly did not know about it, it did not seem like it had happened a few decades ago. It should have only been confirmed recently, which was why the people in the world outside did not know about it. What caused his heart to let out a loud thump against his chest was that the Almighties from True Morning Tao World did not interfere with Dao Kong's actions at all. They just watched as the cultivators from True Sacred Een World stationed in this place died, and they even seemed to be incredibly respectful towards Dao Kong. The abnormality of this scene immediately caused the middle-aged man's expression to change. There's stages among the heirs as well. Which dynast? Is this person from true Morning Tao world? When the middle-aged man's expression changed, he took a swift step forward and charged towards Su Ming in an attempt to use the power of his cultivation base to reverse the universe. At that moment, Su Ming also took a step forward. The galaxy roared. As the flames in the fifth kiln spread out, Su Ming's dark voice reverberated in all directions. Next, it's you guys. There was madness and destruction on the crimson-haired Su Ming's face. The appearance of the fifth kiln caused a much smaller outline of the kiln to remain around him. That outline was a barrier that the middle-aged almighty in life realm could not break, even with a full-powered strike. Once he had absolute protection, Su Ming became invincible. Similarly, once he had this protection, the sea of purple fire that surged into the sky, the flames that could burn almighties in mastery realm, was the first disaster Su Ming stirred up. When Su Ming took a step forward, he crashed into the middle-aged almighty in life realm in the galaxy. A loud bang shot up, and the middle-aged man tumbled backwards. He staggered several hundreds of feet backwards, and his expression turned incredibly sour. Attack at full power. Even if he has the fifth kiln, if we attack at full power, we can still shake him. As the middle-aged man roared, he lifted his right hand and seized the air. Immediately, a thick layer of green appeared in his hand. As it shone with a piercing green light, it turned into a long green blade. When he held the blade, a vast presence that shook the sky and earth erupted from the middle-aged man's body with a bang. At the same time, the other almighties in the area also gritted their teeth and stopped fighting against the tumbling sea of fire. The almighties in Fate Realm were in a slightly better state. They could control their bodies to move about in the sea of fire. The sea of fire tumbled about them, but they were avoided by the laws of fate. However, the mighty pressure from the fifth kiln caused their auras to become chaotic. As for the almighties in Mastery Realm, they suffered the most in the sea of fire. At that moment, they managed to stop, but they did not dare to stop for too long. Resolute looks appeared in their eyes, and in the midst of booming sounds and colorful light, they brought out their strongest enchanted treasures one after another. As they stopped moving, a powerful power erupted from their bodies. There were 10 of them, and they instantly charged towards Su Ming. The 10 long arcs looked as if they wanted to break through the sea of fire. At the instant they closed in on him, a bloodthirsty smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. "You're going to attack me with my kiln treasure?" Su Ming lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pointing at the outline of the kiln around him. Immediately, booming sounds came from the fifth kiln. As they reverberated in the air, the supreme treasures in the hands of 6 of the 10 people who rushed towards Su Ming shuddered simultaneously. As their expressions changed, the supreme treasures flew out of their hands. Once they cut off their connection with the 6 of them, they instantly appeared beside Su Ming. As they surrounded him, buzzing sounds came from them, as if they were worshipping him. As they rotated, light also flowed around Su Ming, giving him a supreme, awe-inspiring air. The expressions of the 6 people who instantly lost their supreme treasures changed. 3 of them tumbled backwards and immediately chose to retreat. Resolve appeared on the faces of the remaining 3, and without any hesitation, they rushed towards Su Ming. Su Ming smiled coldly. When he lifted his right hand, the life inequity spear appeared. Once he grabbed it, he did not even spare a glance at the almighties who were charging towards him. He did not bother about any of them being powerful warriors who would make a large number of cultivators in the world outside worship them with reverence and fanaticism. He lifted his foot and simply allowed the attacks from those people to come at him while he took a step towards the 3 retreating people. When Su Ming's foot landed, a crimson moon immediately appeared behind him. It was so big that it shocked the area. At the same time, the attacks from the 7 people landed on the kiln barrier around Su Ming. A loud bang shot up, and the barrier around Su Ming shuddered. It withstood the strongest attacks from the 7 powerful warriors, causing the kiln barrier to shrink inwardly. Then a powerful rebound stirred up. As it swelled outwards, it caused the seven people's divine abilities to tumble backwards, and with loud bangs, they crashed into their bodies. The more power they used to attack, the more power they would have to tumble backwards. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the seven people who were charging towards Su Ming coughed up blood at the same time and staggered backwards. Even the Almighty in Life realm was the same. His level of cultivation might be unfathomable, but the attack just then was the strongest he could muster with all his power. The rebound from it was also difficult for him to withstand. At the instant the seven people retreated, Su Ming's foot landed on the ground. In the span of a breath, he appeared beside one of the three people who had retreated ahead of time. The life inequity spear turned into a freezing glare that swiftly stabbed at the center of the person's brows. The Almighty's expression changed. He opened his mouth and exhaled. A large amount of fog instantly gushed out of his mouth and turned into a shield in front of him. Once it crashed into the incoming long spear, it shattered with a bang, and the long spear in Su Ming's hand also swayed backwards. The delay allowed the Almighty to avoid disaster, but at the instant he retreated again, Su Ming seized the air in his direction with his left hand. Immediately, a large amount of branches appeared on his palm. With an extreme speed, they sliced through the air and closed in on the person before crawling into his back. Almost at the same time, a shrill scream of pain rang out. The person's body swiftly withered away. Once he turned into a dried-up corpse, his screams came to an abrupt halt. Su Ming swung a large number of branches in his hand, but not a single hint of a Kang's presence spread out from them. Now that Su Ming possessed the complete realm, he could change his presence. At that moment, there was only malice spreading out from his body. Not a hint of a Kang's presence could be found. This was the first Almighty Su Ming had killed in this place. His death brought an even deeper shock to the other Almighties in the area, especially to the remaining two who had fled ahead of time. One of them was the middle-aged woman who had caused the disaster previously. Her face was pale, and as she retreated swiftly, she shuddered, because she saw Su Ming looking toward her. At that moment, even if she was an Almighty, the deaths of her fellow Taoists, the deaths of the tens of thousands of cultivators from true Serene world stationed in this place, the endless sea of fire around her, and the bloodthirsty glare in Su Ming's eyes as he stared at her, turned into a nightmare, causing the middle-aged woman to scream. As she retreated swiftly, a sharp stab of pain shot through the right side of her face, where Su Ming had just slapped her. When the other cultivator who had fled saw this scene, a glint appeared in his eyes. He immediately changed his direction and rushed in another direction. He could tell that Su Ming's target was the middle-aged woman, and at that moment, there was no longer any sort of determination in his mind. Leaving this place as soon as possible was his only choice. If that was the case for him, then the seven people behind Su Ming were the same. Even if the Almighty in Life realm was as awe-inspiring as ever, he could not stop this thought from growing in the others' hearts. No one knew who was the first to retreat, but in the span of a breath, besides the Almighty in Life realm, all the other six people retreated. They turned into long arcs and fled in 6 different directions. In their eyes, there was no way they could fight this battle. Almost at the instant they retreated, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the person who was the first to flee in the opposite direction. Immediately, the 5th kiln in the galaxy moved, and with an indescribable speed, it charged towards the cultivator. With a bang, the cultivator could not dodge at all. In an instant, the vast 5th kiln crashed into him, and his body was torn to shreds. His flesh and blood were reduced to a bloody mess, and his form and soul were destroyed. This was the second Almighty to die. At the instant he died, Su Ming lifted his foot, and when it landed, he appeared beside the middle-aged woman. The next one is you. Tomorrow, the update will resume. I will immediately update it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 11:51. A disaster that had never happened in true Serene world was swiftly spreading out in the galaxy filled with the purple sea of fire. As the crowd retreated, Su Ming appeared beside the middle-aged woman. Her face turned pale, and she knew that it was already too late for her to retreat. She gritted her teeth, and a murderous look appeared in her eyes before she bit off her tongue. At the instant she did so, the half of her tongue that she had spat out turned into a thick layer of fog. As it swept through the galaxy, it charged towards Su Ming. With a bang, the fog crumbled around the outline of the kiln around Su Ming. At the same time, the middle-aged woman's body withered swiftly. In the blink of an eye, she turned into a layer of blood essence that turned into tens of thousands of drops that shot out in all directions. Sever the tongue and scatter the soul. The cries of surprise from the people from true Morning Dao world came from the air. Su Ming let out a cold harumph. Among the people here, the one he wanted to kill the most was the middle-aged woman. There was no way he would let her escape. At that moment, when he saw the drops of blood tumbling backwards in all directions at extreme speed, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the fifth kiln. Immediately, the fifth kiln let out a bang and started rotating. As it did so, a vast suction force appeared. With it, the galaxy shuddered, as if the fifth kiln's rotation had turned it into a gigantic black hole. The tens of thousands of drops of blood that had spread out shuddered and were sucked back. In an instant, they disappeared from the fifth kiln and were completely absorbed. As for whether the middle-aged woman lived or died, it could be said that Su Ming could decide with just a single thought while he was in the fifth kiln. However, he would not kill her for the time being. Once the woman's soul was sucked into the fifth kiln, Su Ming formed a seal with his right hand and pointed at it. Shrill screams of pain and anguished wails immediately came from the kiln. In just the span of a few breaths, a ray of dark light flew out from the fifth kiln and charged toward Su Ming. When it landed on his palm, Su Ming could see that there was a small person in the dark light. That small person's eyes were tightly shut, and its appearance was that of the middle-aged woman. However, at that moment, she had already lost her intelligence. There was only a ball of her soul that contained her memories left. Su Ming squeezed his right hand and immediately crushed the soul. Memories instantly surfaced in his mind. Su Ming was not interested in anything else. What he wanted was Hua Zhu's memories. After a moment, Su Ming turned around and looked at the 6 people who had turned into 6 long arcs and charged forward, along with the Almighty in Life Realm, who stood with a sullen expression on his face. With his combat abilities, Su Ming displayed his destructive will to the people. Tens of thousands of cultivators burned, countless planets crumbled, radix planets melted, and the deaths of 3 Almighties in Mastery Realm. All of this caused Su Ming to become an incredibly terrifying existence in everyone's eyes. Enough! A low shout instantly tumbled out of the Almighty in Life Realm's mouth. His expression was dark as he stared at Su Ming. This place has already become like this. Do you truly intend to kill all of us? If you do, then even if you are one of the heirs of Morning Dao sect, it will be difficult for you to escape from the Culpa Lord's killing intent. The voice of the Almighty in Life Realm rumbled. When it reverberated in the air like thunder, a destructive look shone in the crimson-haired Su Ming's eyes, and a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his lips. Enough? Indeed enough, but I should be the one saying that. Su Ming licked his lips, and the third eye at the center of his brows swiftly opened. When it shrank, the world before his eyes was instantly magnified several times. The entire galaxy instantly became endless in his eyes, and his gaze landed on an old man among the 6 fleeing people. This person was not the first to guess Zhu Yukai's level of cultivation, but the first Almighty in Mastery Realm he faced in his life was the one who had chased Su Ming into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land. At the instant he saw the old man, a chill immediately ran down the old man's spine. He turned around swiftly, and with just one glance, he saw Su Ming looking at him from the distance. Almost at the instant he turned around, dark light shone in Su Ming's third eye. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the 5th kiln. It immediately let out a bang and charged towards the old man at an incredible speed. When the old man's face turned pale and despair appeared in his eyes, the 5th kiln closed in on him. At the instant it was about to touch him, the old man let out a loud roar and lifted his right hand to push at the incoming fifth kiln through the air. With it, the air in front of the old man immediately tumbled about. As it tumbled about, a gigantic illusory palm appeared. It instantly swelled up until it was the same size as the fifth kiln, and it crashed into the incoming kiln. Boom! At the instant the gigantic palm crashed into the fifth kiln, it did not tremble, and neither did its speed decrease. However, as the palm shuddered, it was immediately torn to pieces. The old man's mangled right hand also shattered along with it. As the old man laughed brokenly, the fifth kiln crashed into his body with a bang. Immediately, a bloody flower appeared in the galaxy, and the old man's nascent divinity was sucked into the fifth kiln. Enough! When Su Ming spoke faintly, the color of his hair gradually turned from crimson to gray. When he turned around, with his gray eyes, he looked at the Almighty in Life Realm from true, sacredine world calmly. The Almighty in Life Realm stared at Su Ming with a dark expression. After some time, without a single word, he turned around and took a step into the air, but just as he was about to leave and the other 5 people in the distance were about to disappear, the fifth kiln let out a hum. Ripples immediately spread out and covered the entire area. As if a seal had been placed on it, it froze the galaxy, causing the people who were leaving to come to an abrupt halt. What is the meaning of this? The Almighty in Life Realm had rarely felt so aggrieved in his life. At that moment, he turned around swiftly, and suppressed anger appeared in his eyes. Before I get back what I need, and before I find the person called Huizhu, it would be best if all of you just wait, Su Ming said calmly, and his gaze fell on the area in front of him. The sea of fire surrounded the place. The shattering of the planets and the melting of the radix planets caused the place to become empty. Only the galaxy formed by the countless planets in front of Su Ming was still rotating slowly. All the lives in the vortex of the galaxy had already fled during the disaster just now. At that moment, the only one left in the numerous planets was the person called Huizhu. Perhaps this person had also escaped during the chaos just now, but in the end, he had definitely died in the sea of fire. If he did not die, then there were only 2 possibilities. One of them was that he was still in the vortex of the galaxy, and the other was that he was hiding beside the Almighties who wanted to escape. No matter which one it was, Su Ming could take control of the situation. He looked at the vortex of the galaxy and lifted his right hand to point at it. Immediately, the purple sea of fire around him tumbled about with a loud bang. As it tumbled about, it charged towards the vortex of the galaxy from all directions. In an instant, it was covered. Su Ming could not be bothered to threaten Huizhu to activate the rune in the place. He did not care whether Huizhu was in the vortex of the galaxy or whether she was willing to do so. He used a brutal method to forcefully melt and blast it apart. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the rune in the vortex of the galaxy crumbled. As it spread out layer by layer, the planets in it were immediately reduced to ashes as the flames burned them. As the planets in the vortex shattered, several breaths later, a planet appeared before Su Ming's eyes. As he looked at it, a cold sneer appeared at the corners of his lips. He took a step forward, and his body instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already close to the planet. He took another step forward, and, as the air flowed in reverse, Su Ming stood on the planet's ground. It was a desert, but at that moment, it was burning with purple flames. In the distance was a hall. There was a thick wave of resentment spreading out from within it. When Su Ming looked over from the distance, he immediately saw a distorted shadow outside the hall. That shadow had the vague face of a woman, and at that moment, she was glaring at him. "I have never provoked you, Senior. Why are you doing this?" A shrill voice came from the shadow of the woman's face outside the hall. There was no longer any hint of calmness in her voice. Clearly, everything that had happened in the world outside had completely shocked Divine General Huizhu, so much so that she was almost scared out of her wits as she trembled. She could not imagine just when she had provoked such a disaster. In fact, she was certain that she had never seen the young man before her, and it had been a long time since she left the planet. Su Ming's expression was calm. He took a step forward, and his feet landed on the desert. Every single time he did so, the planet would tremble. As he got closer, the illusory face in the hall started distorting, and a heinous resentment appeared within it. Bring me Kong Mo's physical body. Su Ming took a step forward, and just as the woman was about to continue questioning him, he said flatly, "Bring me Kong Mo's physical body." When he said those words, the woman's expression, which had been about to speak, changed drastically. Disbelief appeared in her eyes, and when she looked towards Su Ming, a dark light shone in her eyes. She opened her mouth and let out a piercing roar. As she roared, the illusory face crumbled with a bang and turned into tens of thousands of faces of men and women of all ages. They charged towards Su Ming as if they wanted to devour him. You overestimate yourself. Su Ming had already closed in. There was not a single hint of emotion in his gray pupils. He lifted his right hand and threw a punch forward. At the instant it landed, the world roared. Before the tens of thousands of faces could even get close, all of them tumbled backwards and crumbled with a bang. In fact, even the hall was torn to pieces as it trembled. When it exploded in all directions, it revealed the table in the hall as well as the candle flame on it. As the candle flame distorted, the woman's face was revealed, and she spoke urgently to Su Ming. "Who is Kong Mo? I don't have his physical body. This is a misunderstanding. Senior, don't listen to the slander of others. Once I extract your soul and search through your memories, we will know whether it is a misunderstanding or not." Su Ming stepped into the crumbling hall and walked towards the candle flame. Happy holidays, everyone. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1152. 1,000-something years ago, nearly 2,000 years ago, if I were to compare it to a point, then at this point of yours in the past, in the same force of power from true Sacredine world, keeping a lookout over the barren lands, in the same vortex of galaxies, in the same planet in the desert, and in the same hall. The cultivator from true Sacredine world who had once chased after Su Ming was kneeling on the ground and telling Huizhu about a person called Mo Su in Western Ring Nebula. He even told her that there was a crane by his side. In the past, Huizhu stood high above the masses. The awe-inspiring might of her voice could make all the people kneeling before her tremble in reverence. With just one sentence, she could decide Su Ming's fate in Western Ring Nebula. In truth, Su Ming had been forced into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land in the past, because of the conversation they had in the past. After 1,000-something years, Su Ming came to this place and stood in front of Huizhu. Huizhu's trembling voice echoed in his ears as she addressed him as senior. It was a pity that Su Ming did not know about the story in the past, or else he would have been filled with a myriad of emotions at that moment. Unfortunately, Huizhu did not know that Mo Su, whose fate had been decided by her words all those years ago, was now standing in front of her. Now, he had destroyed this world, destroyed this part of the starry sky. Fate was always this confusing. It was this way of reversing the universe. It was this way that people would unknowingly change their positions. That was why people were so persistent and obsessed. That was why people would struggle, resist, and try to escape the teasing of fate. However, this struggle and resistance was like a moth flying into a flame. In the end, the one who could be reborn in the fire was definitely not a moth, but an undying phoenix that was willing to fall in the fire. When Su Ming walked closer and lifted his right hand with an aloof expression on his face, he seized the candle flame. At that instant, a piercing roar came from within it. That roar was not unpleasant to hear. Instead, it sounded like a ballad. Even though it was a murmur that could not be heard clearly, anyone who heard it would naturally know that it was a ballad. At the same time, the ancient scroll on the table started flipping through. As its pages flipped, it was as if time was flowing around Su Ming at the speed of 1,000 years. This was Zhu Hua's divine ability, a divine ability that gave her the qualifications to live in this place. Time is like a song. Su Ming's right hand started rapidly withering away right before his eyes, as if 1,000 years had passed while he stretched it out. Huizhu had executed this divine ability multiple times in her life, and every single time she used it, it would bring about a miraculous effect. But this time, insignificant skill. At the instant Su Ming's right hand withered away, he let out a cold harumph. One of the Abyss Builder's inborn abilities was the Art of Time. This divine ability might be effective against others, but against Su Ming, it was completely useless. As he let out a cold harumph, his right hand immediately returned to normal. The power of time disappeared from his body without a trace, and the ancient scroll shuddered. Immediately, half of its pages were reduced to dust. At the same time, half of the candle's flame was extinguished. As it struggled with great difficulty and Su Ming's right hand was about to touch it, the woman's face twisted, and she screamed once again. As she screamed, the ancient scroll on the table was originally flipping its pages from left to right. Even though half of its pages had been destroyed, the other half was still flipping. However, at the instant Huizhu screamed, those pages started flipping in reverse and started flipping from right to left. At the same time, a power that could reverse time swiftly spread out from Su Ming's body. My strongest ability isn't the spreading of time, but the reversal of time. With my life as the price, I will reverse time. Huizhu's voice was piercing. At the instant she spoke, Su Ming's body looked as if it was flowing backwards as time flowed in reverse. His cultivation base and nascent divinity also flowed away. The existence of this power caused the cold sneer on Su Ming's lips to become even wider. He decided to let go of his will and let the power of time reversal spread through his body. 3,000 years, Huizhu roared. Immediately, Su Ming's body shrank rapidly. In an instant, he turned into an area of nothingness, as if he no longer existed. A simple and unsophisticated air appeared on his body. It was the time when he returned to Dark Mountain as time reversed, but soon, all of this disappeared without a trace. When he reappeared, he was already in Dark Mountain. How could this be? Huizhu's eyes went wide, and disbelief shone in them as she roared again. 3,000 years. The reversal of time continued appearing on Su Ming's body. The smile on his lips did not change. As his body became semi-transparent, it looked as if cycles of life and death had appeared within him, and the scenes of Dark Mountain appeared again and again. All of this caused Huizhu's expression to continuously change. Disbelief appeared in her eyes, and she once again sacrificed her life to roar. 30,000 years. This time, she gave it everything she had. As she roared, the power of time let out a bang on Su Ming's body. 30,000 years reversed, and at the instant Huizhu let out a sigh of relief in her heart, she suddenly let out a shrill scream of pain. Su Ming's body was still semi-transparent, but his insides were empty, as if he was in a black hole. This time, he had returned to the time before he was born, when he was in his mother's womb, and he was surrounded by the power of the curse. At the instant Huizhu touched it with her divine ability, the curse spread out and invaded her soul. Her screams of pain echoed in the air for only the span of a breath before all the ancient scrolls shattered, and the candle flame was instantly extinguished. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. He had clearly expected this to happen, or else he would have resisted it earlier. In truth, he had also used this opportunity to witness just how strong the curse on him was in the past. At that moment, when the candle flame was extinguished, the candlestick shattered with a bang, revealing a corpse hidden in the dimension within it. It was a woman's corpse. She was old, and her entire body was rapidly rotting away. A foul stench filled the area. Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air from the corpse's storage bag. The storage bag immediately landed on his palm. When he patted it, it crumbled, and a black coffin fell to the ground. At the instant the coffin appeared, a powerful, mighty pressure spread out from it. It was so strong that the instant Su Ming sensed it, his heart trembled, and his pupils shrank. This presence surpassed all the existences in Su Ming's memories. In fact, the only thing that could compare to it was Chong He's master, the sublime paragon of true sacredine world, the one Su Ming had seen on the life inequity spear in the fifth kiln. At the instant the coffin appeared, the bald crane flew out of Su Ming's storage bag. With a trembling hand, it stared at the coffin and a skeleton placed inside. It could be seen that the skeleton belonged to a ferocious beast, but at that moment, it was a bloody mess. It might have dried up, but it was still impossible to tell what it looked like when it was alive. However, the presence spreading out from the skeleton was astonishingly similar to the bald crane's. The bald crane shuddered and stared at the skeleton in the coffin with a dumbfounded expression. It seemed to be mumbling, but at the same time, it also seemed to be talking to Su Ming. What a strange feeling. Darn it all. Is this my physical body in the past? I have a strong premonition that after I fuse with this body, I'll recover more than half of my memories. I'll be able to remember many things that I've forgotten. I'll be able to remember my origins, my identity, and why I've become a soul. I can still remember. Darn it all, just who is it that nearly destroyed my soul in the past? The bald crane shuddered and lifted its right claw. Just as it was about to touch the carcass, it suddenly froze. I also have a very strong feeling that once I remember these things, I will no longer be me. I will no longer be the bald crane, and I will no longer be Su Ming's companion. Who will I be? The bald crane trembled even more, and conflict appeared on its face. I will turn into another consciousness, or rather, I will turn into my past self, and I will no longer exist. But I will be very strong. Very, very strong. The bald crane's consciousness was a little muddled, and it swiftly threw its head back to roar. Struggle and conflict appeared on its face. When Su Ming saw this, he could only remain silent. He could help the bald crane retrieve its physical body, because to him, the bald crane was not a pet, but a friend. Even though this friend of his was a little unreliable and greedy, but a friend was a friend. However, Su Ming could not help but choose. The bald crane would have to rely on itself to walk down its path. Darn it all, why do I feel like I hate my past self? Once I fuse with it, I will become it, but I really want to fuse with it. I want to remember everything. I want to know what I lost in my life. Why do I cry when I look at husband gazing mountain? Why do I feel terrible when I look at the galaxy? Why do I sometimes think of certain people? As the bald crane struggled, its eyes turned bloodshot. It turned around swiftly to look at Su Ming. Darn all, I'm quite happy right now. I won't fuse with it, but help me keep it. When you gather all the physical bodies in the future, it won't be too late for me to fuse with it. The bald crane gritted its teeth and put on a nonchalant expression as it spoke with great difficulty. Su Ming cast the bald crane a glance. He respected its decision. When he lifted his right hand, he swung his arm, and the coffin exuding a presence that caused Su Ming to shudder was immediately put away into his storage bag. Soon after, the mighty pressure in the area disappeared. The bald crane crouched down. There was a hint of reluctance to part in it, but it soon turned into determination. When Su Ming turned around, it turned into a long arc and left the planet with him. Everything ended. When Su Ming appeared in the galaxy where the forces of power from the former true sacred Een world were stationed, he dispelled the seal on the fifth kiln. The Almighty in Life realm cast Su Ming a deep glance before turning around and disappearing. He left the galaxy. The remaining 5 people in the distance also swiftly left into the distance. Their figures disappeared as they swiftly fled out of the wasteland. I wish all of you a happy holiday once again. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1153. Su Ming stood in the galaxy and stared at the people leaving into the distance with an aloof expression. The space behind him distorted, and a dozen-something people gradually walked out. Among them were Su Hui, the 9 old frail darknesses, and 6 old men with complicated expressions. One of them had a purplish-black face, and the mighty pressure from his body was the thickest. It was almost on par with the almighty in life realm from true Sacredine world. Clearly, he was someone who had the same status as the middle-aged man from true Sacredine world among the forces of power from true Morning Dao world station in this place. Greetings, Your Highness. Welcome back. With excitement on their faces, the 9 old frail darknesses bowed together towards Su Ming. They had followed Su Ming to Divine Essence Star Ocean in the past, and even though they had only been in the periphery, they had experienced quite a lot. They were incredibly worried about Su Ming, and even when they returned to the forces of power from true Morning Dao world, they were still worried about his safety. At that moment, their excitement caused Su Ming to be unable to help himself from wrapping his fist in his palm and bowing to them. When Su Ming turned around, the color of his hair had already changed, returning to normal. He also saw Su Hui. At that moment, there was a mature smile on her face, and the gentleness in it could melt everything. I am Tianyin. Greetings, Your Highness. The purplish-black-faced old man wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming and bowed deeply. In truth, with his level of cultivation, even if he saw true Morning Dao world's heir, he would definitely not do this. Unless that person had truly become the master of true Morning Dao world, they would not be worthy of him bowing to them. However, the things that had happened just then had left him deeply shocked. At that moment, he did not bow to Su Ming because of his status as the heir, but as a form of greeting between people of the same generation. No one in the area thought that his bow was out of place. The 5 people behind him also wrapped their fists in their palms towards Su Ming. Greetings, Your Highness. Su Ming stared at the people in front of him, and a smile gradually appeared at the corners of his lips. At that moment, Flame Fiend's progenitor cast a sideways glance at them. Zhu Yukai, who had long since walked out of the seal, was silent. I remember that when I first came to Divine Essence Star Ocean, no one called me Your Highness. Su Ming looked at Su Hui. Your Highness, you might not know this, but 3 months ago, Morning Dao Sect sent out an order to make you one of the heirs. The person who answered Su Ming was not Su Hui, but one of the 9 old frail darknesses. 3 months ago, a barely noticeable glint shone in Su Ming's eyes. 3 months ago was the time he walked out of the 5th ocean. After a moment of pensive silence, Su Ming suddenly asked, "Did you say that there were 10 heirs just now?" That's right. This time, there are a total of 10 dynasts, and all of them have the right to inherit the throne. The future master of true Morning Dao world will be chosen from among them. But an almighty in mastery realm beside, Tai and Yin said respectfully. When he said those words, he hesitated for a moment. When he saw Su Ming looking over, he continued speaking. But based on the past rules of Morning Dao Sect, you will need to rush back to Morning Dao Sect and accept the challenges and trials from your family members. Once you obtain the progenitor's blessing, you will be able to truly be conferred the title of world. Su Ming's expression remained the same. He smiled faintly. It has been a long time since Morning Dao Sect has decided on a successor, but based on the records in the ancient scrolls, every single time a successor appears, he or she will be tested by his or her family members. If any of them can win the challenge, they will obtain the right to inherit the throne. Once the challenge ends, if they continue to possess the right to inherit the throne, they will obtain the trial of the successor. The sect will issue a mission, and once they complete it, they will be tested. If they still succeed, they will obtain the blessing from progenitor Dao Chun, and then they will be conferred the title. These are not too difficult for you, Dynast Dao Kong, but what you need to be careful of are the other 9 heirs, Tianyin said calmly, while looking at Su Ming. This old man only knows that the other 9 people are all older than Your Highness. Among them, there are 3 who are from the same generation as this old man. Tianyin did not say much, but his words had already pointed out many key points. That's why there will be a lot of people who will challenge me, and there will also be quite a number of people who will not let me complete the trial. Even if I succeed in the end, I will have to face the dangers from the other 9. Su Ming smiled faintly. I hope that one day, Dynast Dao Kong, you You will be able to become the master of true Morning Tao sect, but your actions this time might become a weapon used by the forces of power in the sect to attack you. Also, the sudden increase in your level of cultivation and your possession of the fifth kiln will become the source of suspicion. After all, there are quite a number of cases of possession in the world. Please be careful, Dynast. Tyne smiled. As he spoke, the Almighties beside him lowered their heads and closed their eyes, as if they did not hear his words. The 9 old frail darknesses also had their heads lowered and eyes closed, as if they did not hear him. When Su Ming heard their words, his expression remained the same. There was still a smile on his face. I was enlightened by the progenitor in the past, which is why I have my current level of cultivation. All the fellow Taoists guarding this place were sent here occasionally while the progenitor was in isolation. All of them are eternally grateful to the progenitor. Tyne smiled, then wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to Su Ming. The 9 old frail darknesses bowed to Su Ming again and said in a low voice, "The 8 of us originally failed in our practice of our cultivation methods. The 8 of us broke down and turned into 9 souls. We were bound to die, but the progenitor sent us a spirit core in the past and allowed us to split up so that our bodies could be reconstructed. We will never forget this kindness. The war in true Morning Tao world is still going on. Right now, half of true Morning Tao world belongs to the Immortals Union. Your Highness, once you return, you must be careful of them. We don't have much time. There's a gap between everything in Divine Essence Star Ocean and the world outside. We will need some time before the people outside will know of this. Your Highness, in order to avoid any accidents, I will not send you off." Great Peace voice swung his arm, and the air immediately distorted. Booming sounds reverberated in space, and hundreds of huge warships flew out. When they lined up in front of Su Ming, the near 10,000 cultivators in black armor on them stood up at the same time and knelt down on one knee toward Su Ming. Their voices were like waves of sound that rumbled in space. "Greetings, Your Highness." Their voices echoed in the air and lingered for a long time. Su Ming cast Tai and a glance. Once he wrapped his fist in his palm towards him, he appeared on the largest warship. He was incredibly familiar with it. It was the warship that had brought him to Divine Essence Star Ocean in the past and fought against the Waves of Tears. Flame Fiend's progenitor and Zhu Yu Kai followed Su Ming and stood on the warship behind him. The 9 old frail darknesses turned into long arcs and landed on the warships around them. Su Hui had a smile on her face. Naturally, she was with Su Ming. Before Tai and and the others' gazes, the hundreds of warships turned into hundreds of long arcs and rushed forward. They charged forward, and after about 15 minutes, a huge vortex appeared in front of them. Divine Essence Star Ocean was in the shape of a gourd. At that moment, the vortex was at the mouth of the gourd. If they walked out of it, they would be able to leave Divine Essence Star Ocean, and through the runes of different forces of power keeping a lookout over it, they would be able to head to different true worlds. As he stared at the vortex, Su Ming could not help but feel excited and sentimental. As the vortex drew closer, Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the galaxy behind him. He stared at the barren lands of Divine Essence, and the scene of him being forced into this place 2,000-something years ago, when he was still a cultivator in Earth Cultivation Realm and lying on the ground in Crimson Flame Planet, without moving, appeared in his mind. At that time, he wore a mask and had no emotions. He was so weak that he could be controlled by others. At that time, he did not dare to think about when he would be able to leave the prison-like barren lands of Divine Essence. Yet now, after experiencing all sorts of things, he rose to power in the barren lands of Divine Essence, entered a Kang as its master, awakened life extermination, destroyed the fifth ocean, became the master of the fifth kiln, and even became a legend in the eyes of the alien races in Divine Essence Star Ocean. At the same time, he also destroyed the true, sacred World's garrison in this place. All sorts of things from his past drifted away like smoke in Su Ming's eyes. When he turned his head around and no longer looked at Divine Essence Star Ocean, he stared at the vortex that was already closing in on him and it was difficult for him to suppress the excitement in his heart. Su Ming, was about to return to true morning Tao world. He was about to command the wind and clouds in true morning Tao world and let his old friends in the past know that he had returned. Bright Yang region would no longer be able to affect Su Ming in the slightest, because he was no longer in death region. He had already gone through a metamorphosis in the barren lands of divine essence. He would be like a normal person and step into true morning Tao world. Then Bright Yang region, Tian, in death region's will, and the people he was familiar with in the past. Su Ming knew that when he returned after nearly 2,000 years, unless some of them had already died, he would be able to see all of their faces. His childhood playmates, the prodigies from the various sects and clans, along with his elder and Lei Chun, whom he had never been able to find. Su Ming believed that he would find traces of these people in true morning Tao world. His eldest senior brother, who had the blood of Ninely flowing in his veins, had no head, and was a figure who danced in the air with Shingon. His second senior brother, who had the body of a ghost king, was a man who was like a flower, had a gentle temperament, and loved having the sun shine on the side of his face. He was the vessel spirit of the rune in death region, and he snored. When he opened his eyes, there was anger in them. When he laughed, there was a simple and honest air about him. When he drank, he liked to wipe the corners of his mouth. When he practiced the Tao of entering dreams, he learned runes without a teacher. Once all of these things flashed in Su Ming's eyes, he remembered Fong Tsang Lan, Tian Lan Meng, and the shaman's sacred lady, Wan Xiao. When Fong Tsang Lan's gentleness made Su Ming remember her, the figure standing in the sea breeze would always appear in his mind. Tian Lan Meng's gloominess and the faintly discernible thread between the two of them were usually connected to size. There was also Wan Xiao. The girl's pride in the past made Su Ming remember her, and the image of a fish flying in the sky would always appear in his mind. There was also a woman who had left an incredibly deep impression in Su Ming's mind. Her name, her appearance, and all of her smiles turned into a single sentence in his memories. Do you know why I'm called you Xian? Xian is a type of daylily, and I am the grass in the rain. My mother wanted me to be happy for the rest of my life and not be sad. Su Ming closed his eyes. The last thing he remembered was the woman who stood beside his real physical body. Her expression was cold and without a hint of emotion, but her words were the complete opposite. She was a woman who had deep emotions in order to throw Su Ming's mind into chaos. I'm back. The hundreds of warships shot into the vortex without a single sound. I wish all of you a happy holiday for the third time. My fellow Taoists, if you see the 3 blessings on my ears, do you understand what it means? Today is my birthday. Please bless me. I'll use 3 blessings to ask for 1 blessing. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1154. The galaxy was unfamiliar. It was as empty as ever, but there were some brilliant stars shining in it. To the northwest of true morning Tao world was a gigantic vortex. As it rotated with loud bangs, sounds echoed in all directions. 99 huge stone platforms floated around the vortex. All of them had complicated runic symbols carved on them. They shone with a dark light, and there were 99 cultivators sitting on them. An aura of decay spread out from the bodies of these cultivators. Their expressions were calm, as if they had been sitting there for countless years. In front of each of them was a huge, black sword that was stabbed into the stone platform. Faint sounds of weeping could be heard, which were the sound the 99 black swords weeping. They were weeping and roaring because they had been abandoned. It had been many years since they drank the blood of living beings. They could only stay in the place and quietly accompany their master, protecting him endlessly. The 99 stone platforms formed a circle. When they floated in the galaxy, they also formed the edge of the gigantic vortex. If anyone looked over, it would seem as if the vortex was formed by the 99 stone platforms. As the vortex rotated, the 99 cultivators continued meditating, as if they were asleep. They did not pay any attention to the vortex. Time trickled by. When the time it takes for an incense stick to burn past, booming sounds shook the galaxy, and the vortex's rotation came to a complete stop. Battleships slowly appeared from within. Once the battleships appeared, wave after wave of mighty pressure spread through the entire galaxy. The cultivators on each battleship stood up at that moment. Their expressions were stern. As the battleships appeared, the mighty pressure in the area instantly reached an incredibly high level. But even so, it still could not make the 99 people on the stone platforms open their eyes. After a moment, the gigantic battleship belonging to Su Ming appeared from the vortex. The mighty pressure spreading out from it immediately caused a large amount of ripples to appear in the galaxy. Su Ming stood at the bow of the battleship and stared at the galaxy before him. There was something familiar about it. It was unfamiliar because he had never seen it before, but it was familiar because of Dao Kong's memories of this place. Su Ming knew that this place was true morning Dao world. He might not have stepped into the galaxy before, but it was the universe where his homeland was. When hundreds of battleships appeared from the vortex, the mighty pressure they formed instantly caused the ripples that spread through the galaxy to become stronger. The reason for this was not only because of the cultivation bases of the thousands, or even nearly 10,000 cultivators on the battleships, but also because Flame Fiend's progenitor, Zhu Kai, and Su Ming were there. The mighty pressure from the three of them alone was enough to make the galaxy tremble. Su Ming's eyes were calm, and hidden within them were thoughts that others could not see. He knew that at the moment he stepped into this place, he had turned from being the strongest in Divine Essence Star Ocean to an ordinary cultivator. The fifth kiln had to stay in Divine Essence Star Ocean. Without it, Su Ming knew that when he faced the Almighties in Life Realm again, he would not be able to continue ruling over them. It was precisely because of this that when he was about to leave the barren lands of Divine Essence, he had decided to destroy an entire expanse cosmos to gather together his madness. He believed that before long, this matter would be known by all four great true worlds. Countless people would be shocked, and his name would instantly become famous. What Su Ming wanted was not to disappear from true Morning Dao world and keep a low profile. What he wanted was to be ostentatious, arrogant, and domineering. Because of it, there would not be many existences who would dare provoke him, because no one knew that Su Ming would not bring a supreme treasure like the fifth kiln with him. A barely noticeable glint shone in Su Ming's eyes. The shadow of the kiln shone faintly in his third eye at the center of his brows. Su Ming had indeed left the fifth kiln in Divine Essence Star Ocean, but with the connection between him and the kiln, as long as he had enough time, he could make it appear for a short period of time, just like how he had summoned Kang's true body. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, Su Ming did not want to do so. True Morning Dao world, Su Ming stared at the galaxy, and a smile slowly appeared on his lips. It grew wider with each passing moment, and in the end, it turned into loud laughter. His laughter echoed in the galaxy, but all the cultivators around him acted as if they did not hear it. They continued moving forward with the warship. Su Ming had returned. Very few people could have imagined that he would return in such a manner. He would walk out of the gate to the barren lands of Divine Essence openly and in a dignified manner. The power of Bright Yang was even denser than that of Divine Essence in the galaxy. It existed in the galaxy, but at that moment, it could no longer cause Su Ming much discomfort. Its effect had already been reduced to its limit, and it could even be ignored. There was excitement on Flame Fiend's progenitor's face as he stood behind Su Ming. He might be an almighty, but this was the first time he had stepped into the four great true worlds, and the fact that he had done so openly and in such a manner made him even more excited. The bald crane's eyes moved about non-stop by the side. It looked around, and a smug, naughty grin appeared on its face. Its eyes sparkled, as if it could see countless crystals waiting for its arrival. To it, this was the highest form of enjoyment in its life. This place is near the fixed relocation spot in the barren lands of divine essence. If we want to head to Morning Dao Sect, we'll need about 3 months, Su Hui said softly while standing beside Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He looked at the cultivators on the 99 stone platforms around him who did not show any changes in their expressions when they appeared. He could sense an ancient air from them, and he could also sense a sharp glare that was hidden away from them, but if it spread out, it would definitely shake the sky and earth. These 99 seniors are the powerful warriors from Morning Dao Sect who are stationed at the entrance to this place. Their levels of cultivation are mysterious, but the only thing we know is that they don't practice the same cultivation method as us. Instead, they practice a strange, inherited art. This art is known as a sword, and the sword is alive. They might belong to Morning Dao Sect, but they only listen to progenitor Dao Chen's orders. No one else can order them. Their mission here is to prevent the people from the other true world from stepping into this place. As Su Hui spoke, Su Ming looked at the 99 people and started explaining. When Su Ming heard her words, he stared at them for a moment longer. When he averted his gaze, the hundreds of battleships left into the distance calmly in the galaxy. They turned into hundreds of long arcs that charged in the direction of Morning Dao Sect. They wanted to bring Su Ming to Morning Dao Sect to accept challenges and trials so that he could be conferred the title of a dynast and become a true dynast. Su Ming stood at the bow of the ship and stared at the galaxy all along the way. He sensed the power of bright yang, and when he no longer felt any discomfort towards this place, 7 days passed. During those 7 days, the galaxy was empty. Not a single planet could be seen. Right then, after the 7th day, Su Ming saw a group of planets in the galaxy. We are in Morning Dao Sect's territory. All the cultivators in the planets here belong to the races belonging to Morning Dao Sect. The west and north belong to Morning Dao Sect, but the east and south have already been conquered by the Immortals Union and turned into a war zone. Su Hui said softly and pointed at the planet in front of them. That's the Tower Bottoms. They belong to Sect Elder Mo Da, one of the 3,000 great sect elders in Morning Dao Sect. The hierarchy in Morning Dao Sect is strict, and it's like a tall tower. There's only one person at the top of the tower, and that is progenitor Dao Chun, who has been in isolation for many years and has not come out for a long time. He is not only the sect master of Morning Dao Sect, but also the culpal lord of true Morning Dao world. He protects the entire true Morning Dao world, and above him is the true progenitor, who is also known as the Sublime Paragon. However, the true progenitor is a mystery. No one knows where he is or who he is. Under the progenitor is the Council of Sect Masters. They decide most of the matters regarding Morning Dao Sect. There are 72 people in the Council of Sect Masters, and each of them is an incredibly powerful existence. These people usually do not venture out. Most of them are in isolation. Once every 100 years, 3 of them will wake up to decide the matters in Morning Dao Sect for the next 10 years. Below the Council of Patriarchs is a place that exists in the void all year round. Only now can they be considered to have truly appeared the 10 Great Highnesses, including you. The 10 heirs will each be in charge of a hall. This hall will be empty at the start and will need to be added on its own. Below the 10 heirs are the 333 gods, 666 immortals, and 999 saints. These people have incredibly high statuses, and they can be said to be the people who decide the fate of Morning Dao Sect. They're sleeping in the area and will not come out easily. Once they do, they will destroy everything. These are the power of Morning Dao Sect's inner sect. They will not appear unless Morning Dao Sect runs into a disaster. The ones facing the outside world are the 4 halls of Morning Dao Sect. One of them is the Sect Elder Hall. The second is the War Hall. The third is the World Protection Hall. And the fourth is the Palace Hall that only the 10 heirs can control. It has been an empty existence for many years, and even the Council of Sect Masters has no right to interfere with it. As the battleships moved forward, Su Hui told Su Ming about the structure of Morning Dao Sect in a soft voice. Some of these things were in Dao Kong's memories, and when they overlapped with Su Hui's words, his understanding of Morning Dao sect became even clearer. Su Hui continued speaking, telling them everything she knew about Morning Dao sect. The hundreds of battleships continued forward, and after a moment, they closed in on the planet in the galaxy. Long arcs swiftly flew up from the planet. There were tens of thousands of them, and they were packed densely together. When the cultivators from the planet flew out, all of them bowed to the battleship where Su Ming was. There were a dozen or so people who stood in front of the cultivators and clasped hands with respectful expressions on their faces. "Greetings, great sect master." As the dozen or so people spoke, the tens of thousands of people behind them all bowed and spoke in unison. "Greetings, great sect master." Their voices echoed in all directions with loud rumbles. Even though they were in the galaxy, their voices still sounded like thunder. There was fanaticism and respect on their faces, as if with just one word from the great sect they spoke of, their entire race would follow their lead. "I'm riding slowly, and the second day will be slightly later. I'll go and rest for a while before I continue writing." To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1155. There are 4 great halls in Morning Dao sect. Besides the Palace Hall, the other 3 halls belong to the sect masters who awaken once every 100 years. They listen to their orders and carry out all their requests. The most famous among them is the Sect Elder Hall. There are 99 hall managing sect elders, 700 grand sect elders, 3,000 great sect elders, and 30,000 ordinary sect elders. The ordinary sect elders can take in disciples at will, and their disciples are the outer members of the Sect Elder Hall. Their total number is difficult to estimate. As Su Hui spoke about the structure of Morning Dao sect, Su Ming looked at the tens of thousands of cultivators worshipping him beyond the planet in the distance and remembered his master, Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi had once mentioned that he had been taken in as a disciple by a sect elder of Morning Dao sect. At that moment, when he matched Su Hui's words, Su Ming gained a deeper understanding towards the Sect Elder Hall of the Outer Sect. The mission of the Sect Elder Hall is to control all the races and forces of power in true Morning Dao world like a spider's web. As time passed, they turned true Morning Dao world into a huge net. The chaos caused by the Immortals' Union in true Morning Dao world has exceeded Morning Dao sect's expectations, and it is also related to the existence of the Sect Elder Hall. There is also the War Hall. This is a force of power that can make all the races in Morning Dao sect tremble. They are like a blade, and wherever they pierce through, blood will flow in rivers. There are 1 million battle cultivators in the War Hall, and they carry out the mission of destruction. They are the sharpest force in the rebellion caused by the Immortals' Union. Next is the World Protection Hall. They do not readily join the internal battles of a true world. They are stationed at the borders of true Morning Dao world to prevent other true worlds from invading it. They are the strongest hall against the outsiders. Only when Morning Dao sect is in danger will they be mobilized, because if they move, there is a high possibility that true Morning Dao world will be invaded by other true worlds. It is just like the 99 people you saw just now. They are members of the World Protection Hall, but they were chosen to guard the entrance to the barren lands of divine essence. Finally, there are the 10 great palaces. Since they have only existed in name over the years, I do not know what sort of mission Morning Dao sect will have when they open the palaces. As Su Hui spoke, Su Ming stared at the approaching planet and the tens of thousands of cultivators worshipping it. He could sense the strength and size of Morning Dao sect in all of true Morning Dao world. This was clearly a race, and it was definitely not a small one. If tens of thousands of people had the power to fly out of the planet, then there would definitely be more people in the planet. Even if they did not have the power to fly out of the planet, they would definitely have combat abilities. It was especially so when Su Ming saw quite a number of Lords of World planes among the tens of thousands of people. The dozen-something people right in front were all in the later stage of world plane realm. In fact, there were 3 in lunar Culpa realm and 1 in solar Culpa realm among them. This force of power far surpassed the berserkers in Su Ming's memories. But at that moment, when this powerful race saw morning Dao sect battleships, all of them moved out and worshipped it together, using the highest form of respect to show their respect towards morning Dao sect. Su Ming fell silent. He knew that morning Dao sect was very strong. After all, they were the strongest existences in a true world and were the masters of a world. However, these were just some of Su Ming's feelings. Even if he had Dao Kong's memories, he could not see it clearly. Yet now, when he saw this race worshipping them, he could sense the might of morning Dao sect. After all, there were plenty of races like this in true morning Dao world. In fact, there were quite a number of races that were even stronger than them. However, before the chaos caused by the Immortals' Union, all the sects and clans had to obey morning Dao sect and treat morning Dao sect as their master. In silence, a myriad of emotions rose in Su Ming's heart. He did not notice that the bald crane's eyes were shining brightly behind him. They were crystalline, as if there were countless crystals sparkling in them. The bald crane was so excited that its body trembled, and extreme excitement appeared on its face. The hundreds of battleships moved forward. At the instant they closed in on the tens of thousands of people, the bald crane rushed forward. Crystals! Hand over all of your crystals. Grandpa Crane wants crystals. Give me 10,000. No, 50,000. Darn it all. Give me 100,000 crystals. The bald crane had been holding back for a long time, but as it roared, it shouted what it believed to be a very large number. Its words immediately stunned the 30,000 cultivators. The dozen-something people right in front were also momentarily stunned. Even the cultivators on the battleships beside Su Ming had strange expressions appear on their faces. Su Hui sighed. She shook her head and did not speak. Su Ming frowned. When he saw the bald crane's excited expression, he did not try to dispel its excitement. The entire galaxy fell silent at that moment. Only the bald crane's voice continued echoing in the air. After a few breaths, the old man in solar Culpa realm, among the dozen-something people in front of the tens of thousands of cultivators, lifted his right hand and patted his storage bag with a strange expression. Immediately, he brought out an emerald green bag, and when he pushed it forward, it charged towards the bald crane. There are 1,000,000 crystals in here. Great sect leader, please accept them. The bald crane's eyes went wide. It grabbed the bag and quickly opened it. With a solemn expression, it counted the number of crystals carefully a few times before it beamed and swiftly returned to Su Ming's side. It hugged the bag, and a brilliant light shone in its eyes. I'm rich. I'm rich. Darn it all, I'm going to be rich on the way. In the midst of the tens of thousands of cultivators' respect and the strange feeling in their hearts, Su Ming and his group gradually left. The area was quiet. No one spoke, but there would occasionally be people who would turn their heads sideways to look at the bald crane. Flame Fiend's progenitor was originally standing beside the bald crane, but at that moment he instinctively took a few steps back. He sighed in his heart, thinking that if he was in Su Ming's place, he would have asked for at least 1 billion or 800 million crystals. The bald crane had been shouting for a long time and only wanted 100,000 crystals, but in the end, Su Ming had given them a lot more. It was just too embarrassing. Su Ming closed his eyes and sat down cross-legged. He turned a deaf ear to the bald crane's actions of counting crystals behind him. When the group traveled on the warship for a few more days, the bald crane suddenly let out a shrill scream. It instantly caught the attention of all the cultivators in the area. When they looked over, they saw the bald crane shuddering and screaming through gritted teeth. Damn it! Damn it! He lied to me. This isn't 1,000,000 crystals. It's still missing 3 crystals. It's only 1,000,000 crystals. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. How could I have counted wrongly? I'm still missing 3 crystals. My crystals. The bald crane screamed shrilly in pain. As it shuddered, it looked as if it had lost the most precious thing in its life. My cute crystals. My beautiful crystals. My crystals are even more important than my life. Damn it, I'm going to die. I'm really going to die. When the crowd heard the bald crane's words, they fell silent once again. When they looked at the bald crane, their gazes were no longer strange, but filled with respect. They respected an existence whose obsession towards crystals had replaced everything else. It was especially so for the bald crane's screams of pain and incessant chatter. They lasted for 10 days as it continuously tried to persuade Su Ming to turn around and return to the planet so that he could take back the 3 crystals he lacked. The bald crane's persistence made all the people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Also, when everyone looked at Su Ming, their gazes were filled with a different kind of respect. If it had been them, they would have gone mad a long time ago because of the bald crane's torture, but Su Ming's expression did not change in the slightest, and he would even occasionally reply to it. In the end, even Flame Fiend's progenitor could no longer endure it. He seized his bosom with his right hand and brought out 3 crystals to hand to the bald crane. These are yours, not mine. Even if you give me 3 crystals, I'm still missing 3. The bald crane seized the crystals, but its piercing voice still echoed in the air. Su Ming was already used to it. This was not the first time the bald crane had shown its extreme obsession towards crystals. Time trickled by, and soon, nearly a month went by. The hundreds of battleships charged through the galaxy and passed by one planet after another. The bald crane became more excited each time it went through the spoils. But even so, it was still obsessed with the 3 crystals it had miscounted. When they were only 7 days away from Morning Dao Sect, Zhu Yukai suddenly opened his eyes behind Su Ming, and a brilliant light shone in them. Then, the bald crane's incessant chatter came to an abrupt halt. A glint appeared in Flame Fiend's progenitor's eyes, and the 9 old frail darknesses also opened their eyes to reveal a slit. The hundreds of battleships instantly shone with a powerful light. The near 10,000 cultivators on them also put on solemn expressions. All their gazes landed on a planet in front of them at that instant. More accurately speaking, it was not a planet, but a gigantic egg. Its surface was filled with mud, and it looked like a gigantic rock, which was why it looked like a planet. But in truth, it was a gigantic egg. The mighty pressure spreading out from it was so strong that even Zhu Yukai had to open his eyes. It was a telling sign of just how powerful the life within was. There were dozens of cultivators around the gigantic egg at that moment. All of them floated in the air with their arms crossed over their shoulders. They stared at Su Ming and his group with cold smiles on their faces. Sitting on the gigantic egg was a young man. He was bare-chested, and in his hand was a beast bone. He was chewing on it, and his hair was a mess. A primitive and barbaric presence spread out from his body, and he was narrowing his eyes as he stared at the hundreds of battleships. What a grand display! Are you Dao Kong, the one I've never met, but who became the dynast's descendant? The young man's gaze was like a blade. Once he swept his gaze past the people on the battleships, it landed on Su Ming. As he spoke, he bit down on the beast bone in his hand. Once he finished eating it, he picked up the constellation robe by his side with his right hand and wiped his hands on it. Then, he touched his mouth and glared at Su Ming. An awe-inspiring presence swiftly spread out from his body without holding anything back. You saw me, one of your many grandfathers, and you still haven't come and kneel before me? When your father was still my grandson, he didn't dare not kneel before me. Go back and ask your stupid mother whether she still remembers me. Dao Fei Feng, on that rainy night 1,000 years ago. Who do you think you are? Come here. Dao Fei Feng, he is... Su Hui's pupil shrank. Just as she was about to introduce him to Su Ming, he spoke faintly. Hang his head at the bow of my battleship and bring it back to Morning Dao Sect. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1156. Su Ming's words were casual. Not a single change could be detected on his face, but a freezing glare had already appeared in his eyes. The arrogant young man before him was not enough to make Su Ming's emotions fluctuate so much that he would appear with his three personalities. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the young man alone did not have the right to see the gray or crimson Su Ming. His voice was still echoing in the galaxy. It might not be loud, but when it echoed in space, it was as if thunder had roared, causing the young man exuding a primitive presence to be momentarily stunned. Then, he started laughing loudly. The dozens of cultivators by his side also had mocking smiles on their faces. There was an air of superiority in their smiles, and it was a scorn towards Su Ming and his group. Interesting. You want to hang my head on the bow of the ship? Have you damaged your brain from training too much? Or are you so excited that you forgot yourself after you were made a dynast? Who gave you the right to speak to me like this? A powerful wave of killing intent swiftly appeared in the young man's eyes. As he spoke, the arrogance in his smile became even stronger. In truth, it was no wonder why the young man would be so arrogant. At that moment, Flame Fiend's progenitor, who was beside Su Ming, had subconsciously restrained his presence when he stepped into true Morning Dao world. He was dressed in a crimson long robe that covered his head. After all, this was true Morning Dao world. As an alien race from Divine Essence Star Ocean, he was filled with uneasiness towards this place from the bottom of his heart, and he instinctively hid his presence. As for Zhu Kai, if he did not spread out his mighty pressure, it would be difficult for others to see the depths of his level of cultivation. At that moment, he seemed to be around World Plane Realm. As for the others, besides Su Hui, who was in Lunar Culpa Realm, only Su Ming could make him feel slightly pressured. However, since he dared to come, he naturally had something to rely on. At that moment, as his words echoed in space, Su Ming's expression remained calm. He only said one sentence faintly. I'll give you 10 breaths. Kill all of this person's followers. Su Ming's calm words contained an invisible, grim air that echoed in the people's ears. Only Flame Fiend's progenitor's heart appeared, allowing him to understand that Su Ming's words were directed at him. A wild cackle came from the crimson long robe. At the instant it spread through the galaxy, it stirred up a large amount of ripples. Flame Fiend's progenitor wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Su Ming. Rest assured, Your Highness. When he finished speaking, he took a step forward. When his foot landed, he stepped into the starry sky, and a huge vortex appeared beneath his feet. The appearance of the vortex immediately caused the starry sky in all directions to flow in reverse like flowing water, causing the pupils of the young man and his followers to shrink. As Flame Fiend's progenitor stepped into the galaxy, his wild and untamed laughter spread out. He slowly lifted his head and stretched out his right hand, which was as shriveled as a claw. He slowly lifted the crimson robe over his head to reveal his ugly face that was as thin as a skeleton. His red pupils looked as if there were flames filling them. At that moment, Flame Fiend's progenitor looked like a monster that had descended into the world. At the instant he revealed his face, his power erupted from him without bothering to hide it. The power of an almighty and mastery realm reverberated through the galaxy with loud booming sounds, causing the young man's expression to change drastically. The followers beside him originally had scorn on their faces, but at that moment, their expressions changed to shock and disbelief. Their expressions caused Flame Fiend's progenitor to feel incredibly delighted. As he cackled, he was about to say something when suddenly, 7. The bald crane's personality was one that only desired to see the world in chaos. At that moment, a thought appeared in its head, and it immediately shouted a number. It corresponded to Su Ming's order of 10 breaths. Once the bald crane shouted the number, all the people besides Su Ming looked at it with strange gazes. Flame Fiend's progenitor even let out a loud roar and took a step forward to instantly close in on the young man. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The young man's face instantly turned pale. A master of fate, lives, and death. He had not expected that there would be an almighty who was a master of fate, lives, and death by Dao Kong's side. This sort of almighty was incredibly noble in his heart. He might be a direct descendant of Morning Tao sect, but he did not have the right for the sect to send such an almighty to stay by his side. At that moment, his mind was blank. At that moment, a shrill scream of pain suddenly came from the mouth of one of his followers. That follower's body was instantly set ablaze and turned into ashes in an instant. Only the sound of his scream of pain was still echoing in the air. Flame Fiend's progenitor licked his lips and walked out from the space beside the cultivator who had disappeared. 9. The bald crane immediately roared, and its voice was so shrill that it tore at Flame Fiend's progenitor's heart. Anger appeared in the eyes of Flame Fiend's progenitor. He did not have time to say anything else. He lifted his arms swiftly and swung them around him. Immediately, a purple sea of fire erupted from his body with a bang and turned into a gigantic palm of flames in the galaxy that appeared in the space beneath him. The palm swiftly seized the air. From the distance, the palm of flames in the galaxy was more than 100,000 feet big, and it looked as if it occupied an entire galaxy. As it seized the air, the galaxy rumbled and ripples spread out. As the universe trembled, besides the young man and the gigantic egg under his feet, all his followers were reduced to ashes. In fact, they did not even have time to scream in pain before their bodies and souls were destroyed. When the palm of fire disappeared, the bald crane's piercing voice filled with smugness reverberated in the air. 10. Darn it all. 10 breaths are up. You didn't complete your order. The bald crane shouted loudly with a smug look on its face. When Flame Fiend's progenitor turned his head around and glared at the bald crane, the young man called Dao Fei Feng stood on the huge egg in the galaxy before Su Ming and the others. His face was pale, and shock as well as terror appeared in his eyes. At the instant the palm of fire had closed in on him, he had a strong feeling that he was about to die. If it was not because the strange egg under his feet had spread out a gentle power to surround him, then the strike just then would have been the last thing he saw in his life. He suddenly felt that he was incredibly laughable. He had been so arrogant previously and had even intentionally come to this place to wait for Dao Kong and the others to arrive. His goal had been to intimidate Dao Kong so that he would give up on the title of dynast on his own. In his eyes, no matter how strong Dao Kong was, he would not be able to fight against him. Most of his followers were in the later stage of World Plane Realm, and there were even 3 of them who were in Lunar Culpa Realm. His own level of cultivation was already at the state between Lunar Culpa Realm and Solar Culpa Realm. This sort of power and this sort of force of power caused him to be incredibly confident. In fact, he had even thought that Su Ming's words just now were laughable. His words about hanging his head on the bow of the ship had caused the young man to mock him, and he wanted to see just what gave him the confidence to say such a thing. However, Dao Kong's expression had not changed in the slightest. He had only said 10 breaths in a casual manner, but to Flame Fiend's progenitor, all his followers would be instantly killed. Flame Fiend's progenitor glared at the bald crane. When he saw that Su Ming's expression remained the same and did not change, he became nervous in his heart. He quickly turned around and looked at Dao Fei Feng with killing intent. Damn it, why didn't you die just now? Flame Fiend's progenitor might be an almighty, but he was not a cultivator. He did not gain his level of cultivation through epiphanies. Instead, he had the inborn ability of the alien race. He had devoured many of his people, which was why he had obtained his level of cultivation. Because of that, his personality had changed quite a lot. At that moment, he was worried that Su Ming was displeased with him, which was why he placed all his resentment on the young man who had not died. As he spoke, he charged towards the young man. I am a direct descendant of Morning Tao sect. This is a battle between our people. Senior, please don't get involved. This is a fight between the people of Morning Tao sect. Dao Fei Feng's expression changed. The huge egg beneath him swiftly retreated while he screamed shrilly. Senior, which hall do you belong to? I have an order from the sect elder chamber here. Senior, please don't attack. As Dao Fei Feng retreated, he immediately brought out a white plate from his bosom and spoke loudly. His heart was filled with anxiety, but he was also confident that once he brought out the plate, this almighty from Morning Tao sect would hesitate for a moment. Get lost to the sect elder chamber, darn it all. Flame Fiend's progenitor growled. Without realizing it, he used the words that belonged to the bald crane. As he spoke, he moved, and under Dao Fei Feng's disbelieving gaze, he charged forward. A loud bang shot up, and a huge egg shuddered. A gentle screen of light appeared, causing Flame Fiend's progenitor's right palm to land on it. With a bang, the screen of light swayed violently, and Dao Fei Feng coughed up a mouthful of blood. "You're still not dead?" Flame Fiend's progenitor immediately felt anger burn in his heart. He was an almighty, but he had not been able to kill a puny person who was half a step in his solar culpa realm with 2 attacks. Even though all of this was due to the strangeness of the huge egg, there were still people watching, and this matter immediately caused Flame Fiend's progenitor to feel incredibly humiliated. The bald crane's smug and mocking laughter made Flame Fiend's progenitor even angrier. Die, die, die. Flame Fiend's progenitor moved forward, and booming sounds reverberated through the galaxy. The screen of light formed by the huge egg continued distorting, and in the end, it shattered with a bang. As the screen of light shattered to pieces, Dao Fei Feng coughed up blood again. His body instantly withered, and he looked as if he had lost half of his life. Terror and despair that had never appeared before appeared in his eyes. "Grandfather, save me." At the instant he said those words, a large number of cracks appeared on the huge egg beneath him. A black dog's head rushed out and bit down on Flame Fiend's progenitor. Your grandfather is this dog? Damn it, this is a big black dog. This is a humiliation. You're humiliating me." The bald crane had originally been watching the show, but at that moment, it glared at Flame Fiends, and it instantly became enraged for no reason. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1157. Su Ming's expression did not change. It did not matter where Dao Fei Feng came from or what sort of people were behind him. Since he dared to stand in his way, then his fate was set. When Su Ming returned to true Morning Dao world, he would not choose to keep a low profile. All those who provoked him would have to face his killing intent. He would slaughter his way to fame, slaughter his way to the point where the sky and earth would be overturned, slaughter his way to a nightmare that would make others tremble, slaughter his way to a memory that would make all those in true Morning Dao world shudder, in fear, even many years later. As the bald crane screeched in pain, the gigantic egg under Dao Fei Feng completely shattered. A roar reverberated in space, and a gigantic ferocious beast with 7 heads walked out of the gigantic egg. All 7 heads were dog heads, and they were densely packed together on the ferocious beast's single neck. It was an incredibly terrifying sight. Its entire body was black, and at that moment, all 7 dog heads were roaring as they charged towards Flame Fiend's progenitor. With an indifferent expression, Su Ming lifted his right hand. "All warships, activate the power of the rune and attack this place." Su Ming brought his right hand down and pointed at the spot where Dao Fei Feng was. Once he said those words, all the cultivators on the warships felt a chill run down their spines, but they swiftly sat down cross-legged. Once they activated the rune, the hundreds of warships shone with a dazzling light. As it shone, waves of destructive presence spread out in all directions. When the presence of the hundreds of warships appeared, Dao Fei Feng's expression changed drastically. "Why were you? This is a fight between us. I'd have let you have your follower attack, but you actually want to use the power of the warships?" Almost at the instant he said those words, the galaxy shuddered. A loud bang surged into the sky, and the runes on the hundreds of battleships were activated at full speed. In the midst of loud, booming sounds, hundreds of pillars of light shot out from the battleships and charged towards where Dao Fei Feng was. The galaxy trembled. Loud bangs surged into the air, louder than thunder. The hundreds of pillars of light landed on the spot where Dao Fei Feng was. If the 7 ferocious beasts had not swiftly moved in front of him to protect him, the place would have been reduced to nothingness, and the heavily injured Dao Fei Feng would have been injured badly again. But even though he was protected, the 7 ferocious beasts had to withstand the attacks from the hundreds of pillars of light. As booming sounds echoed in the air, their bodies continuously moved back. At the instant they stopped, the ferocious beast let out a pained howl. Its entire body was a bloody mess, but it turned around swiftly and glared at Su Ming. Then, it bit Dao Fei Feng and turned into a long arc that charged into the distance, intending to flee. Anger shone in Flame Fiend's progenitor's eyes. With his level of cultivation, he felt incredibly aggrieved over what had happened that day. First, the gigantic and strange egg had blocked his divine ability, and then a ferocious beast had appeared. Its skin was thick, and it looked like it could withstand his divine ability head-on. This caused Flame Fiend's progenitor to suddenly wonder whether his level of cultivation had regressed after he came to true Morning Dao world. But at the instant he wanted to chase after Dao Fei Feng, a freezing glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. With a calm expression, he took a step forward. When his foot landed, he landed beside Flame Fiend's progenitor, and with another step he appeared in the distance of the galaxy and stood right in front of the 7-headed ferocious beast. A ruthless glare shone in the ferocious beast's eyes. At the instant killing intent shone in Dao Fei Feng's eyes, Su Ming lifted his right hand and struck the ferocious beast in a seemingly casual manner. You overestimate yourself. Without that almighty by your side, you're just asking for death, puny cultivator. Dao Fei Feng growled. Just as he was about to fly out of the ferocious beast's mouth, the pupils of the 7-headed ferocious beast shrank, and disbelief appeared in its eyes. A power that surpassed that of an almighty in mastery realm erupted from Su Ming's palm. It could easily shatter a planet, make an entire galaxy collapse, and cause even the hearts of almighties in Fate realm to tremble when they ran into it. All of that power landed on the ferocious beast's body. With a bang, Su Ming's palm pushed against space, but it made the ferocious beast let out a shrill scream of pain. Its body tumbled backwards, and a large amount of blood gushed out of its body. 6 of its 7 heads exploded at the same time, as they were reduced to a bloody mess. Even Dao Fei Feng was swept up by the ripples of power. He coughed up blood, and his body was flung out. This scene caused Dao Fei Feng to tremble. When blood flowed out of his body, his gaze when he looked at Su Ming was filled with disbelief and dumbfoundedness. The consciousness of the ferocious beast that only had one head left at that moment was muddled. There was no longer any thought of saving Dao Fei Feng in its head. The only thing that existed in its head was to run. With all its strength, it fled madly. It sensed a presence from Su Ming that caused it to tremble. That presence might be indistinct, but it was a power that seemed to be able to destroy the universe. Su Ming's expression was indifferent. He stood in the galaxy, and when he lifted his right hand, purple and black smoke immediately surrounded his hand before turning into the life inequity spear. Once he held in his hand, he flung it towards the fleeing, dog-headed, ferocious beast in the distance. With a strange howl, the life inequity spear charged forward and drew a long arc in the galaxy. It tore through space, and the howl sounded like the excited screams of the soul of the life inequity spear. It contained the excitement of wanting to destroy all manner of lives. In an instant, it closed in on the dog-headed ferocious beast, and with a speed that it could not dodge, it pierced its neck with a bang. With its huge body, it charged towards the hundreds of battleships. With a bang, the life inequity spear pierced the bow of Su Ming's battleship. It might have pierced through, but it did not damage the structure of the battleship. Instead, it pinned the dog-headed ferocious beast's body and head to it. All of this might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, it had happened in the span of a few breaths. It was so quick that the people in the area instantly fell into dead silence. Su Ming's expression was calm. He turned around and looked at the stunned Dao Fei Feng in the galaxy not too far away. Su Ming's previous words appeared in Dao Fei Feng's mind again. He had previously found those words to be laughable and had even been filled with disdain, but when they appeared in his mind again, they were incredibly sharp and caused him to tremble. It made him realize that he had been too full of himself. A bitter expression appeared on Dao Fei Feng's face. When he saw Su Ming taking a step towards him, as if he was about to close in on him, Dao Fei Feng swiftly moved back and spoke. The direct descendants of Morning Dao sect are forbidden from killing each other. This is my fault, and I am willing to pay the price. Before he could finish speaking, Su Ming's foot had already landed and appeared in front of him. Without a single word, he lifted his right hand and seized Dao Fei Feng's neck. He would take his head and hang it at the bow of the battleship. This was Su Ming's previous words, and he would not change them. If you kill me, you will definitely be punished by the Council of Sect Masters. Dao Fei Feng's face turned pale, and despair appeared on his face. As he screamed shrilly, he wanted to dodge. He could sense Su Ming's killing intent, and it was so thick that his heart trembled when he sensed it. What answered him was a cold harumph from Su Ming. His right hand closed in on Dao Fei Feng like a hot knife, threw butter, and went to seize his neck. But at the instant Su Ming's right hand was about to touch Dao Fei Feng, Dao Fei Feng's face twisted, and he let out the strongest roar in his life. "Grandfather, save me! Save me!" With a bang, a powerful force tore through the galaxy from space and forcefully appeared behind Dao Fei Feng. It turned into an old arm that seized Dao Fei Feng's shoulder and yanked him to another spot. At the same time, the person who had appeared out of nowhere lifted his other hand and seized Su Ming's incoming hand. The two collided in the galaxy. Boom! 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 Su Ming moved, but the person who had walked out of thin air to save Dao Fei Feng coughed up a mouthful of blood. He staggered several hundreds of feet backwards, and when he lifted his head, an old face was revealed. It was an old man dressed in a long gray robe and had the air of an immortal. He stared at Su Ming in shock, and shock appeared in his eyes. While he dragged out Fei Feng back, he hastily spoke. "I am the great sect elder of the sect master chamber, Dao Hualin. Your Highness, please give me face, and I will repay you in the future." "Give you face." When Su Ming said those words flatly, he lifted his foot, and a gigantic moon appeared behind him. At the instant it appeared, a large commotion broke out in the area. It came from the hundreds of cultivators on the battleships, as well as the gray-robed old man and Dao Fei Feng, who was stunned once again and had blood trickling out of his wounds. At the instant the gigantic moon appeared, Su Ming took a step forward and instantly closed in on the old man. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal. The three-colored light from the moon behind him became piercing, and he pointed at the old man. The old man's expression changed drastically. He immediately bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up blood. Then he roared at the blood he coughed up, and it shuddered before turning into blood fog. It turned into a gigantic, ferocious head with its ghastly mouth wide open to devour Su Ming. Boom! At the instant Su Ming's finger touched the head made of blood fog, it crumbled to pieces. The old man's face instantly turned pale. As he retreated again, he roared, "No matter what, you are not the real dynast. You killed your fellow sect members and disrespected the sect master chamber. Don't blame me for working together with all the sect elders to remove your right to be a dynast. Is it the same as having one more friend or one more enemy? Dao Kong, give me an answer." The old man might look rather disheveled, but there was an air of superiority in his words. It might have been largely suppressed, but it still showed up subconsciously. Clearly, as the great sect elder of the sect master chamber, he was used to this sort of attitude. "Who do you think you are?" Su Ming asked flatly. "I apologize to all of you. Forget about the fact that I'm late in updating the chapter. I won't be able to write the third chapter. I'll fight for the third chapter tomorrow. I can only fight for it. If my daughter doesn't continue suffering tonight, and if she doesn't continue going to the hospital after midnight, I promise you that I'll write the third chapter tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1158. You. When the old man heard this, anger immediately appeared in his eyes. He was one of the great elders of the Hall of Elders. Normally, when he was in the outside world, everyone would be polite to him. They would tremble with fear, and their words would be filled with caution and respect. Even in Morning Dao sect, since his surname was Dao and he was a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, he had quite a bit of seniority, and there were few who dared to refute him. He was already used to others carrying out his orders and paying attention to his dignity. When he faced Su Ming at that moment, Su Ming's words of, "Who do you think you are?" instantly caused anger to rise in the old man's heart. Good, good, good. The old man was so angry that he swung his arm with a cold sneer. I'd like to see just how much courage you have to kill two of your own kind. With a cold harumph, the old man grabbed Dao, Fei Feng, and turned around, intending to force his way out. Su Ming's expression was calm. Almost at the instant the old man retreated, he lifted his foot and took a step forward. The gigantic moon behind him shone with a tricolored light. When it spread through the galaxy, Su Ming's foot landed on the ground, and he appeared beside the old man. At the instant the old man turned around, Su Ming stretched out his right hand at lightning speed to seize the old man. The old man let out a loud roar and bit the tip of his tongue to cough up a mouthful of blood fog. But almost at the moment it appeared, Su Ming spoke flatly. Scatter. When Su Ming said those words, the gigantic moon behind him shone with tricolored light. The galaxy around Su Ming looked as if there were laws that had dissipated before gathering together once more. As the invisible laws changed, the blood fog dissipated. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. At the instant the blood fog disappeared, Su Ming's right hand appeared in front of the old man. He seized Dao Fei Feng and yanked him backwards, easily dragging the pale and despairing Dao Fei Feng from the old man's grasp. Grandfather, save me, save me. Dao Fei Feng was already scared out of his wits. The fear in his heart had already reached its peak. He could sense a merciless chill from Su Ming, and when he screamed for help in a shrill voice, Su Ming swung his right hand. When he unfurled his fingers, Dao Fei Feng's body was swept up by a huge force, and he swiftly turned into a long arc that charged towards the hundreds of battleships. With a bang, his screams of pain reached their climax. At the instant his body was pushed forward by the great force, he was stabbed into the handle of the life inequity spear, which was originally pinned to the bow of the ship. His entire body was pierced by the spear. Together with the dog-headed beast, he was nailed to the bow of the boat. His body twitched, and a large amount of blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. His eyes gradually dimmed, and his head tilted to the side as he breathed his last. At the instant his nascent divinity and soul pierced the life inequity spear, they were all crushed. The area was filled with dead silence. Even the cultivators who belonged to Su Ming on the battleships were silent. With shock in their eyes, they stared at Su Ming. After all, Morning Dao sect strictly forbade people from killing each other, but at that moment, Su Ming had clearly violated this great taboo. However, Su Hui's expression remained the same. It was the same for the 9 old frail darknesses beside her. They did not seem to be too worried because of Dao Fei Feng's death. This scene also shocked the old man from the sect elder chamber. He was momentarily stunned, then red appeared in his eyes. Disbelief lingered in them as he glared at Su Ming. One of the duties of the sect elder chamber is to monitor the members of our family. If anyone breaks the rules of the sect, we have the right to kill them. Dao Kong, as a direct descendant, you killed a member of your family, and you have already broken the rules of the sect. Your cultivation base should be crippled, and your body and soul should be suppressed by the expanse cosmos until your body and soul are destroyed to serve as a warning to others. I, as the great sect elder of the sect elder chamber, bear witness that you are guilty. The old man growled. The resentment in his eyes was incredibly clear. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand, and a white plate immediately appeared on his palm. He slapped it with his left hand, and the viciousness in his voice was incredibly clear. Dao Fei Feng took the initiative to provoke you, intending to challenge you and obtain the right to challenge you, Your Highness. He will be your first challenger. Based on the order the progenitor sent out when he was in isolation a few years ago, as long as a successor appears, all other members of our family who challenge him will be punished with death. Su Hui smiled faintly. When she lifted her right hand as well, a blue plate appeared on her palm. At the instant she brought it out, waves of ripples spread out from it. Sect Elder's plate. The old man's expression changed drastically. He stared at the plate in Su Hui's hand and staggered a few steps backwards. A complicated look appeared on his face. He also remembered that since the successor of Morning Dao sect had not appeared for many years, he had forgotten about the status represented by the title dynast. He also remembered the order the progenitor had sent out when he was in isolation a few years ago. He had said that those who challenged the successor would be punished with death. You are Dao Fei Feng's grandfather. Then, do you also want to challenge me? Su Ming asked faintly. His words were like an invisible slap on the old man's face, causing his expression to change continuously. Without a single word, he turned around and turned into a long arc to leave. Su Ming did not stop the old man. Once he watched him leave into the distance with a cold glare, he turned around and walked towards the hundreds of ships. When he passed by Flame Fiend's progenitor, his footsteps came to a halt. Flame Fiend's progenitor's heart immediately let out a thump. This will not happen again, Su Ming said faintly. Flame Fiend's progenitor quickly lowered his head and voiced his agreement. Only then did he let out a huge sigh of relief in his heart. He had come into contact with Su Ming when they were in the fifth kiln. In the beginning, he had regarded him with disdain, and when his physical body was destroyed because of his hostility, that disdain turned into wariness. He then schemed against the descendants of the ancient shamans with Su Ming, and through the series of events, Flame Fiend's progenitor became incredibly wary of Su Ming. When they left the fifth kiln and went to the fifth ocean, Flame Fiend's progenitor's wariness towards Su Ming had turned into respect and fear. In fact, a strange thought had unknowingly appeared in his mind. As long as he followed Su Ming, then no matter how great a danger he ran into, he could easily solve it. This sort of thought caused Flame Fiend's progenitor to willingly follow him with just one sentence when Su Ming walked out of the fifth ocean. His respect towards Su Ming grew stronger as time passed, and had already seeped deep into the progenitor's soul. At that moment, he stared at Su Ming's back, then lowered his head to cover himself with the crimson robe before returning to the battleships with him. After a moment, the hundreds of battleships roared and moved together to continue charging towards Morning Dao sect. They sliced through space and charged forward. At the center of the battleships was the bow of Su Ming's battleship. The life inequity spear was stabbed into it, and on it were the corpses of the dog-headed ferocious beast and Dao Fei Feng. Time trickled by, and 5 days went by. During them, Su Ming and his group moved through various planets, and all the races they ran into would come out to greet them. There were also direct descendants from Morning Dao sect. Su Ming ran into a few of them on the way, but when they saw Dao Fei Feng's corpse hanging on the bow of Su Ming's ship, their expressions changed drastically, and without any hesitation, they turned around and left. This was a blatant act of intimidation. With the corpse on the battleship, Su Ming could avoid a lot of unnecessary interference, so wherever the hundreds of battleships went, they would be intimidated. When the fifth day passed, Su Ming stared at the galaxy in the distance, and his pupils shrank slightly. Standing on the battleship, he could vaguely see a scarlet-red light in the distant starry sky. Even though the light was weak, and even though it was some distance away, he could not help but feel a monstrous bloodlust from the depths of his heart when he saw the scarlet-red light. Clearly, there was a great slaughter and war going on in the spot where the crimson light came from. There are at least 100,000 cultivators fighting against each other. A glint appeared in Flame Fiend's progenitor's eyes as he stood beside Su Ming, and he licked his lips. Crystals? Darn it all, just how many crystals are there? The bald crane's eyes shone brightly. Su Hui's expression was solemn. The 9 old frail darknesses also stood up and stared at the galaxy in the distance. With the battleship speed, we should be able to reach this battlefield in about a day, but judging by its location, it should be the relocation spot we want to go to, one of the 9 old frail darknesses immediately said in a low voice. Su Hui lifted her right hand, and when she flipped it over, the sect master's spirit appeared. Once she cast it a glance, she shook her head and said, "We didn't receive any early warnings. The battle should have just started, but judging by its location, it is indeed the place we want to go. One of the 108 relocation spots in Morning Dao sect in the galaxy. Once we go there, we can use the power of relocation to return to Morning Dao sect," Su Hui said softly while standing beside Su Ming. "If you want to enter Morning Dao sect from the outside world, there are no other paths. Only the 108 relocation spots, and Morning Dao sect has to activate them accordingly. Otherwise, even if outsiders have control over the relocation spots, they won't be able to step inside. As for coming out of Morning Dao sect, it's much simpler. If you walk to the end of any direction, you will be able to move through space and appear in the galaxy of true Morning Dao world. The relocation spot in front of us is the closest one, but it's rather close to the Immortals Union's territory. If we go around it, we'll need to travel for about a month." Su Hui looked at Su Ming. True Morning Dao world was so big that even Su Ming, who had lived through the years in the barren lands of divine essence, could sense that the entire true world far surpassed the area of divine essence. In truth, if Su Ming was alone, he could shift and use the shortest amount of time possible to reduce the distance between them, but there were hundreds of battleships here. Because of that, his speed would naturally be much slower. However, Su Ming was not in a hurry. He also wanted to see more of true Morning Dao world. Besides, the battle ahead of them was clearly started by the Immortals Union. When he heard Su Hui's words, Su Ming nodded. He wanted to see whether there were any familiar faces in the battlefield. "Let's go to the relocation spot in front of us," Su Ming said faintly. First update delivered. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1159. The sounds of battle shook the sky and earth in the galaxy. As booming sounds reverberated in space, they spread out in all directions. Colorful lights formed by all sorts of divine abilities bloomed like fireworks in the galaxy, releasing a magnificent and unparalleled beauty for an instant. There was also fresh red blood. A thick presence filled the area and stimulated all the cultivators in the area. Compared to the war between the Immortals Union and Morning Dao sect, this was only a small-scale battle. There were only around 100,000 cultivators participating in it. There were about 80,000 cultivators from the Immortals Union and 50,000 cultivators stationed at the relocation spot, and a sudden battle had broken out between them. 2 days ago, the 80,000 cultivators from the Immortals Union had used some unknown method to descend. They had used the relocation rune in the place, and it was originally a relocation rune that could only send them to Morning Dao sect. However, a large number of people from the Immortals Union had suddenly appeared there, catching the 50,000 Morning Dao sect disciples stationed there off guard. During those 2 days, nearly 20,000 of the 80,000 cultivators from the Immortals Union had died. Very few of their corpses were complete. Most of them had been reduced to pieces that floated in the area. Blood floated in the galaxy, causing the bloody stench to become incredibly thick. The price for killing 20,000 cultivators from the Immortals Union was 20,000 corpses from the Morning Dao sect disciples stationed there. The power of the cultivators from Morning Dao sect had surpassed that of the Immortals Union, but the sudden nature of the battle had caused the disciples from Morning Dao sect to be heavily injured during the early stages of the battle, which was why they had suffered the same number of casualties. The battle continued, and the slaughter continued. The eyes of the cultivators from both sides had already turned bloodshot. At that moment, there was a huge eyeball floating in the galaxy among the army of cultivators from the Immortals Union. There was an aloof look in that eyeball as it stared at the entire battlefield. There were 3 middle-aged men surrounded by old men exuding powerful presences. One of them was handsome. He might have looked like a middle-aged man, but he had a mature air about him. His eyebrows were as sharp as swords, and as his eyes shone, it could be imagined that he had been incredibly handsome when he was still a teenager. He placed his hands behind his back and stood there quietly. On his back was a huge bow. He was dressed in a brocade long robe, and there was an awe-inspiring look on his face. The 2 people behind him clearly could not compare to him in terms of presence, so they could only stand by his side. "Senior Brother Bay, it's almost been 3 days." With the speed at which Morning Dao Sect sends messages, even if the Union has a method to stop and delay them, if we fail, the person to the left said in a low voice. "That's right, Senior Brother Bay," said the person to the right of the man. 3 days is more than enough time to complete the mission. I presume that the fellow Taoists from the other places have already returned. Should we leave now? The Alliance sent us here so that we could test how many days Morning Dao Sect would take to react to the situation. The relocation interruption Art the Sacred Lady has come to understand should theoretically be able to stop the situation for 7 days, causing the battle in Morning Dao Sect to be delayed for 7 days. Morning Union Star. If we go, we can of the Tao of the sea of the 3 of, and the Tao of we will the of the. We are. This is. The person to the left hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but a glint appeared in the eyes of the man in the brocade robe. The Union Star has not sent the order to retreat. The eye of the sacred temple is above us. No one dares to leave on their own. Do not speak anymore. Get out of the chariot. When he said those words, the people to the left and right sighed in their hearts. They instinctively looked at the huge eyeball above them, which was exuding an aloof presence. They immediately lowered their heads and voiced their obedience. They took a few steps back and sent orders to all the cultivators in the Union Star. Booming sounds immediately reverberated in the air. The sky distorted on one side of the battlefield. As space turned into a vortex, 9 gigantic creatures appeared. They were crimson, had ferocious long horns, and were tens of thousands of feet tall. When they appeared in the midst of the booming sounds, a war chariot that caused the expressions of all the people from Morning Dao Sect to change. It was a war chariot formed by hundreds of thousands of swords. It was crimson red, as if it had been dyed in blood. When a grim presence spread out from it, the 9 war chariots rushed into the battlefield. As the battle became even more intense, at that moment, in a galaxy that was incredibly far away from the battlefield was a region belonging to the Immortals Union. There was a huge planet formed by nearly 100 planets gathered together, and on it was a huge palace floating in midair. The palace was multicolored and shone with waves of light. The ground was silent, and not a single sound could be heard. There was a woman sitting cross-legged in the palace. She was dressed in white and had a beautiful face. Not a single hint of emotion could be detected on her face. She was cold and aloof. There were 9 balls of light floating in front of her, and there were pictures flashing continuously within each of them. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see clearly that there were 9 battlefields within the 9 balls of light. The 3rd ball of light was where the man named Bay was. The woman in white stared at the 9 balls of light calmly. Occasionally, she would cast her gaze on one of them. Runic symbols shone in her eyes, as if she was deducing something. Time trickled by. As the woman occasionally paid attention to the battles in the 9 balls of light, the 3rd day went by in the galaxy where the man named Bay was. The small-scale battle had already reached an incredibly devastating state. A large number of people from the Immortals Union had died, but the people from Morning Dao Sect had also paid an incredibly great price. Fatigue filled their hearts, and despair enveloped their bodies. Their fellow Taoists died one by one, the thick stench of blood around them, and the crazed slaughter from the cultivators from the Immortals Union caused them to feel as if they were about to break down in the midst of fatigue and despair. Why hasn't the sect sent reinforcements? In the past, when we fought against the Immortals Union, reinforcements would arrive within a short period of time. But this time, it's already been 3 days, so why hasn't anyone come? This is a relocation spot, and it's a place that Morning Dao sect cares deeply about. Why haven't they come? These questions were the strongest shouts in the hearts of the 10,000-something cultivators from Morning Dao sect who were still fighting against each other. What's going on? Behind the 10,000-something people from Morning Dao sect were 9 huge platforms beside the relocation runes. They formed the relocation runes, and at that moment, there was an old man standing on one of them. Beside him were 3 middle-aged men, and their expressions were dark and filled with despair. The old man had his eyes closed. His entire mind had fused with the platform under his feet, but after a moment, when he opened his eyes, his face was pale. He lifted his head to look at the galaxy above him. It was the second battlefield beyond the battlefield. There were dozens of cultivators fighting against each other. 9 of them belonged to Morning Dao sect, and they were the people from the war chamber guarding the rune. The ones fighting against them were 17 cultivators from the Immortals Union. These people were engaged in an intense battle in the galaxy above them, holding each other back. They were all in lunar Culpa realm, and they were the strongest among the cultivators in the area. I've already sent a warning to the sect, but it's been 3 days, and there's no response. Just what happened? Why is this happening? It's fine if they don't come to provide reinforcements, but I've already sent out a message asking them to activate the relocation runes to return to Morning Dao sect, but there's still no response. If the sect doesn't activate this damn rune, then outsiders won't be able to enter. But these damned cultivators from the Immortals Union used the relocation runes to come here. How did they do it? Red filled the old man's eyes. He was the sect elder in charge of guarding the place, and one of the great sect elders in the sect elder chamber. But at that moment, no matter what his status was, it was useless. He had tried to contact the sect just now, but there was still no response. Despair filled his entire being. If he ran, then forget about whether he could escape by a stroke of luck. Even if he did, he would be treated as a traitor by Morning Dao sect, unless he switched sides and joined the Immortals Union. But what about his people? They were in the galaxy controlled by Morning Dao sect. Once he ran, then his people would face a disaster of destruction. Great sect elder, how is it? The 3 middle-aged men beside the old man looked at him. The sect's reinforcements might not be able to come, the old man said in anguish. The 3 of them fell silent. The sounds of battle and the shrill screams of their sect disciples before they died caused their hearts to clench in pain. Suddenly, one of the 3 middle-aged men lifted his head and said, "Great sect elder, perhaps we will have reinforcements. I remember that 10 days ago, we received an order from the direction of Divine Essence Star Ocean. It told us that Dynast Dao Kong and his group will use the relocation rune to enter Morning Dao sect from this place, and asked us to make preparations beforehand. Based on the time, they should be here soon. Dao Kong, forget about this person's level of cultivation. Even if he really comes, how many followers does he have? It's not enough. And with the blood-red light surging into the sky, with the personalities of the direct descendants of Morning Dao sect, they would have long since circled around this place and gone to other relocation spots. Why would they continue to come here? But no matter what, he is the heir in one of the 10 great dynasts. So what? I met this person once by chance 1,000-something years ago. He might seem friendly, but in truth, he's incredibly cold. The group fell silent. Even if we die in battle. The old man laughed brokenly and threw his head back to roar. His voice reverberated in the battlefield and fell into the ears of all the Morning Dao sect disciples. For our people, even if we die in battle, once we die, the sect will definitely not treat our people unfairly. Fight, my fellow Taoists. Use our lives in exchange for the safety of our people. It's just death. Why are you afraid? His words echoed in the air, and all the Morning Tao sect disciples who heard it let out the strongest roar in their lives in the midst of despair. Their eyes turned red, and they descended into madness. It's just death. 10,000 people roared together, and the booming sounds of their voices were louder than thunder. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1160. Roars reverberated in the air and shook the universe. There were still tens of thousands of cultivators from the Immortals Union. Behind them was the huge eye of the sacred temple, and the man named Bei stared at the great sect elder from Morning Tao sect who had shouted from a distance. Morning Tao sect is a sect that is bound to be destroyed, but in truth, there are still quite a number of powerful warriors who are worthy of respect. The man named Bei sighed in his heart. They had been fighting against Morning Tao sect for hundreds of years, and every single time they were in a desperate situation, people like this would always appear in Morning Tao sect. Even if they had shouted those words and carried out those actions because their people were in Morning Tao sect's territory and they had to do it for their people's continued survival, they were still worthy of respect. The Immortals Union might seem like a great force of power, but in truth, no one like this had ever appeared before. It's a pity. The man named Bei shook his head. Have the war chariots self-destruct. While these people are in a state of madness, let them snap to their senses, the man named Bei said flatly, and someone behind him immediately gave the order. After a moment, the 9 gigantic war chariots that had caused a large amount of slaughter in the battlefield crumbled with a bang. Each war chariot was formed by hundreds of thousands of swords. 9 war chariots were equivalent to millions of swords, and at that instant, they stirred up a gust of wind that charged forward with loud bangs. The charge of millions of swords was equivalent to a disaster to the cultivators. There were originally only 10,000-something Morning Tao sect disciples left, but at the instant the 9 war chariots collapsed, shrill roars instantly drowned out all other sounds in the area and turned into the final sound. 7,000 people were reduced to minced meat. With their roars, they disappeared forever from the world, their bodies and souls destroyed. It was easy to say those words, but there were certain words that were the same as promises. Before they were spoken, they were their masters, but once they were spoken, they would become their slaves. The remaining 5,000-something Morning Tao sect disciples might have shouted those words, but at that moment, they felt as if cold water had been poured over their heads. As they trembled, they continuously retreated, and signs of dispersing appeared on their faces. War chariots? We're just the people guarding this place, not the war chamber. We don't have any war vessels. We're just 80,000 cultivators from the Alliance, and yet we're given 9 sword war chariots. As the great sect elder from the sect elder chamber laughed brokenly, he looked at the disciples from Morning Tao sect who were about to scatter. He swiftly leaped up and turned into a long arc before him. The beam of light was like a moth flying into a flame. It knew that it was going to die, but it still flew toward the flame. He did not say any more agitated words. Neither did he shout anything about even if he had to die. There was no longer any need for him to do so. If someone wanted to flee, then so be it, but he could not flee. This charge was not for Morning Tao sect, and neither was it for himself. It was for his people, his children, and his blood kin. With my death, Morning Tao sect will be tolerant of my people. This is worth it. The old man's eyes were bloodshot. With madness and determination, he rushed into the camp belonging to the Immortals Union. The 2 of you attack. Use the moon destroying lightning to end his life. He's already asking for death. Your levels of cultivation might not be high enough, but he won't dodge, the man named Bei said flatly, while looking at the old man charging like a moth in the distance. We can end this battle ahead of time. The man named Bei lifted his head and cast a glance at the huge eyeball above him. A hint of disgust shone in his eyes. However, at the instant he looked at the huge eyeball above him, an uproar suddenly broke out in the battlefield. Those voices came from the people from Morning Tao sect and the people from the Immortals Union. As the commotion broke out, waves of excited cheers began to spread. Our reinforcements are here. It's the sect's warships. The people from the sect have come to save us. As those voices echoed in the air, even the great sect elder, who had rushed out with the intention of seeking death, came to a halt and turned his head around to look. He saw hundreds of battleships speeding through the starry sky, as well as nearly 10,000 cultivators on board. Excitement flickered in his eyes, but when he looked off into the distance, he saw nothing but emptiness. There were only these people. In the midst of the old man's anguish, the uproar in the area slowly disappeared. Despair rose in the hearts of the thousands of cultivators from mourning Tao sect once again. After experiencing the madness just then, their will to die had been extinguished by the millions of swords, and they had started showing signs of breaking down. Their excitement had been reignited by the appearance of the hundreds of warships. But when they saw that there were only hundreds of warships, their excitement was mercilessly extinguished once more. This cycle repeated itself, and they no longer had any will to fight. Breaking down almost instantly appeared on all the thousands of cultivators. As the thousands of cultivators from mourning Tao sect scattered, the tens of thousands of cultivators from the Immortals Union fixed their gazes on the hundreds of warships with killing intent. The man named Bei also averted his gaze from the huge eyeball above him and looked at the hundreds of warships in the distance. They're not the reinforcements from mourning Tao sect, or else they wouldn't be the only ones here. They should be passing by, but since they're already here, we should make them stay, the man named Bei said calmly. Su Ming stood at the bow of the ship and stared at the battlefield in front of him. He saw the tens of thousands of cultivators from the Immortals Union, as well as the thousands of people from mourning Tao sect scattering. He also saw the thick stench of blood around him, as well as the endless amounts of torn flesh that filled the galaxy. "Do I have a war banner?" Su Ming suddenly asked. Su Hui was momentarily stunned. The eyes of the oldest of the 9 old frail darknesses immediately lit up. He lifted his right hand and struck his body. A long piece of cloth appeared on his palm. It fluttered in the air, and it was several thousands of feet long. "Your Highness, I don't have a war banner right now, but as long as you need it, I can make a simple one right now." "I want red," Su Ming said faintly. The old man immediately swept the long cloth in his hand through the area. It was dyed with the blood floating in the area, and a blood-red flag immediately appeared in the galaxy. "Hang the war banner and shout my name. Let these people know who you belong to, and let me see whether you have the right to continue staying by my side." When Su Ming's words landed in the ears of all the cultivators on the battleships, a brilliant light shone in their eyes. When the old man hung the blood-red war banner on Su Ming's battleship and flung it, the red war banner that was several thousands of feet long fluttered without wind. The hundreds of battleships let out a loud bang, and hundreds of pillars of light shot out. At the instant they charged towards the battlefield, nearly 10,000 cultivators took a step forward together and turned into 10,000 long arcs that charged towards the battlefield. Dao Kong. At the instant the near 10,000 people rushed out, they roared together and shouted a name. Their voices shook the galaxy and tumbled in all directions like thunder. They also reached the hearts of the thousands of scattered, mourning Tao sect disciples, as well as the ears of the cultivators from the Immortals Union. Their voices tumbled and fused with the presence of the near 10,000 people who rushed out. At that moment, there was only one word that could describe the near 10,000 cultivators. They were like wolves and tigers. Booming sounds shook the sky and earth. The hundreds of pillars of light from the hundreds of battleships crashed into the windstorm formed by the battlefield with a destructive will. As it spread out, the near 10,000 cultivators who belonged to Su Ming closed in, and a frenzied battle swiftly broke out. At the instant the near 10,000 people crashed into the tens of thousands of people who were exhausted after fighting for 3 days, they began fighting endlessly. The thousands of scattered cultivators from mourning Tao sect might have spread out, but when they saw this scene, they became hesitant. They did not know whether they should continue fighting or continue fleeing. However, the blood-red war banner and Dao Kong's name echoing in their ears caused the extinguished fighting spirit in their hearts to gradually burn once more. The great sect elder from the sect elder chamber looked at the near 10,000 people charging towards them, saw the flying blood-red war banner, and heard the cultivators shouting his name. Without any hesitation, he turned into a long arc and charged towards the battleship where Su Ming was. At that moment, the 9 old frail darknesses flew out together, but they did not rush towards the battlefield. Instead, they charged towards the area above the galaxy where the dozens of powerful warriors were fighting fiercely. The bald crane's eyes shone brightly, and with a single move, it disappeared without a trace. Only Su Ming could see half an arm swiftly closing in on the battlefield without anyone noticing it among the torn pieces of flesh around him. Flame Fiend's progenitor cackled and licked his lips. A bloodthirsty look appeared in his eyes when he looked towards Su Ming. When he saw him nod, he let out a long string of laughter and intentionally did not reveal his full power. Instead, he revealed the appearance of someone who was around Lunar Culpa Realm and left. Clearly, he did not want to release the mighty pressure of an almighty and make the others flee. Instead, he wanted to enjoy the pleasure of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Is that good? Su Hui chuckled softly and looked at Su Ming. I have to let them vent. Su Ming smiled faintly and looked towards Su Hui as well. Su Hui met Su Ming's gaze, and a hint of gentleness that she usually did not show appeared in her eyes. She pursed her lips and smiled, but when she saw the huge eyeball floating in the galaxy, that smile immediately disappeared, and her pupils shrank. What is that? Su Ming's gaze also fell on the gigantic eyeball. He could vaguely feel that the gigantic eyeball was also looking at him. This item was different from the third eye Su Ming had obtained in the past. That third eye had its own intelligence, but this huge eyeball gave off a feeling that it was a dead object. Clearly, it was an enchanted vessel controlled by someone from a distance. That's the sacred temple's eye from the Immortals Union. I am Ouyang Kong. Greetings, Dynast Dao Kong. The person who answered Su Ming was the great sect elder from the sect elder chamber who was rushing over from a distance. When he got closer, he saw the dog-headed ferocious beast and Dao Fei Feng at the bow of the ship. His heart trembled, but he averted his gaze and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow deeply towards Su Ming. Su Ming nodded. His gaze landed on the huge eyeball. When he moved his gaze downwards, he saw the man named Bei. At the instant he saw him, a strange light shone in Su Ming's eyes. Bei Ling, the third watch arrived. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.